Yeah.
Well, welcome to our 2026 spring workshop. I'm Angela Parker. I'm the WyoPass president. I'm gonna do a few quick announcements and then we'll run around the room and introduce ourselves so we all kind of get to know each other since we have a smaller group this year. Couple things we have coming up. The Wyoming Funding Summit is June 22nd through 25th in Gillette, Wyoming. It's through the Grants Management Office. And it's all about grants management stuff. It's a really good summit and it's no cost. They have some really good topics and you really kind of learn a lot there. They have beginner and advanced classes. The first couple of days, it's basically a lot of grant stuff. The second couple of days, they actually have a couple of tours as well. So it looks like a really good conference this year. In August, on August 26th through the 28th, the Western Planner Conference is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They got a lot of fun things planned. Andrew Bowen from here in Wyoming, he is doing a 5K, they call it a muddle. This is what I'm looking forward to, so that's what I'm announcing. It's gonna be like, kind of like a walk, run, scavenger hunt. It'll have little stations, you can do some fun activities, and it's on a walking path through Sioux Falls, and you cross one intersection, I guess, so it's really pretty cool. It's along the river, and so anyway, that conference looks like it's gonna be a really good conference as well. So you can find more information on that at on the Western Planner website. So for WyoPass this year, for our fall conference, we are combining with YGO again. This year, so far we know that it will be in Evanston, but other than that, more information will be coming soon. So we'll get that information out to you as soon as we get it. But with that, for the Western Planner Conference, if you know anybody that you want to nominate for the Citizen Planner Award, that would be a planning commissioner or somebody that's in planning, that's not a professional planner, that's maybe a volunteer. They're looking for nominees for that and for Planner of the Year. For WyoPass, our awards, we have appointed commission or individual, Planner of the Year, and planning project. So if you have anything that you want to nominate for any of those awards for Western Planner or for WyoPass, just send them to us. I think that's all the announcements. So we'll start over here with Heidi and she can introduce herself and then just tell us who you are, where you're from, where you work, and then we'll just go around the room.
I'm Heidi McCullough. I'm with the city of Douglas. And is that cool?
Sure.
I'm probably sorry. It's early anymore. I'm Rebecca Kochek and I'm from Casper and I'm a planning and zoning commission.
I'm Lori Klatt. I work for the city of Casper.
I'm Tara Carr and I work for the city of Riverton. I don't work, I'm a planning commission. Or for somebody else.
Good morning, my name is Gary Michaud. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Riverton.
Ken Koleski, Director of Planning, Lincoln County.
Susan Larson, Commissioner, Planning Commissioner of Teton County.
Andrew Beamer, City of Casper, Planning and Zoning Commissioner.
Justin Scott, I'm the Chief Building Official for the City of Casper.
Johnny Patil, Planning and Zoning Commissioner with Saratoga.
Lyle Hunt, City of Little Rock, Building.
Maggie Pennington, planning secretary for Southern County.
I'm Kim Billivan. I'm a planner with Park County, working in the
Jenny Kramer, planners.
Erica Decker, planner, Park County.
Joy Hill, Park County Planning Director.
Katie Gibson, planner for Lincoln County.
Derek Taney, Community Economic Development Director, City of Laramie. She, City of Laramie.
Emma Gibson, planner of the city of Laramie. Chelsea Porter, I'm community development clerk here at the city of Riverton.
I'm just Angela.
His name is Steve. He does have a name.
I'm Tracy and I'm the city engineer.
Good morning, I'm Jeremiah Rubin of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association.
I'm Ashley Hartstreet, I'm with Wham. I'm Clara Chapman, Community Development Director, City of Denver.
Thank you. And then we have Paul, he's our administrator. He's doing all the work for us. Just to let you know, we have a few Wi-Fi passwords. I'm not sure which network it's for, but the guest network seems to work good without the password if you need the Wi-Fi. And thank you to Staley Engineering for sponsoring our workshop this week. We appreciate all that they do for us. So I will welcome Jeremiah and Ashley. They are going to be our first presenters. They are from the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. So welcome them. Thank you.
What do you want us up here? Yeah, or were we gonna do joint or?
Whatever you want to do.
Or do it? I just say we kind of reflow it.
Okay.
So I'm Ashley with Wham, and this is my partner in crime, Jeremiah. You know, we're here to serve local governments, and we've had a very busy last year in legislative lips, and we're hoping this year we could both do more organizational stuff. So we're very excited, I think, for both of us to be able to be out and be here. I'm fresh off the Corporations Committee on Open Records, so that was a lot of fun. Not really yesterday. And so we can kind of walk through legislatively if you guys want to hear what's going on there. Also, why I had your attention to promo. We are doing a fast track permitting webinar on May 26th at 10, and Derek's going to be leading the charge along with Charles and the bill sponsor. I know that was kind of painful for all of us to work through, but I do think it brought us a lot of goodwill with this legislature and made us forward facing. And, we kind of did our part of trying to address, how can we be business ready and shovel ready for housing, as we know that's the #1 issue in every community. So that's open to, even if you're a county or a county planner, I can send that out to WyoPass I'm more than happy, or a commissioner, I'm more than happy for anyone to be on that because we do have to implement that July 1st. We are, and I haven't talked to Jeremiah about this yet, but Wham has purchased software that is going to make permitting a lot easier through Blue Blade. Has anybody heard about them before? Are you working with them? Not yet.
We already have.
Your own, okay.
Works right now, so
Yeah.
yes, we did discuss with that, but in the end, I don't think.
It worked for you.
Right.
So Pinedale's doing a pilot program. I know, are you with Cody?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm like, I know Cody does City Works. Yep.
Yeah.
So, which is great. We just are trying to offer a tool. We were able to say, if we bought in bulk, it gets it cheaper for everybody. And it's definitely more geared to the smaller communities. But if you're interested in learning more, I know enough to be dangerous, but can get you in touch with the right people. So we're pretty excited about that partnership that's coming on. We think a lot of this technology is going to help us, especially in the space. Like, I'm excited to play with this because I think it will be interesting to see how this potentially can help us with open record requests. So that's kind of like the big news flashes I have.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. First, I wanted to thank you all for your assistance over the course of the past few years. Doing our job, we can try and make it look easy, but it's really your boots on the ground knowledge that it helps us navigate some of these pathways here. And some of you have been pretty active in helping us redirect some of the legislation. Joy, Angela, appreciate the help. Melissa, Ruth is a tremendous asset for you all and for us. So a big thanks there. I thought it would be helpful perhaps to kind of look back at the landscape of what we've seen the past few years. First off, you all will remember in 2023 was the first iteration of the Regulatory Reduction Task Force. And mostly, if you go back and look at that year, it was a lot of talking and hopefully a little bit of listening from the legislature. They didn't really bring any bills forward that year, although they discussed a number of concepts, and I can touch on some of them because they become some of the themes that we're seeing right now. Then in 2024, they kicked up again and continued largely around the exaction issue, and that's certainly something that we should talk about here. Housing exactions, and for some of you, you may not know what that is. It's largely a Teton County, town of Jackson issue. They charge developers, both if you're building residential as well as commercial, essentially based on your impact to the community for workforce housing. And that's become a flashpoint up there. Quite a flashpoint. And you've seen some of that happen down in the legislature. But they did look at a number of things. Accessory dwelling units became a piece of that. We already mentioned exactions. Building permit notice requirements was there. Zoning protest petitions, state land housing, let's see, required housing development strategies. So if you've been watching what Montana did a few years ago, there was some interest. They came out of, I think, two places, one, the governor's office, and then the Wyoming Business Alliance, really essentially saying you would all be required to develop strategies. If you didn't, then you were going to get X over here, which ultimately those concepts didn't move along. You saw stairwell exits, conversations around construction moratoriums, which is coming back up in the data center realm. None of those ultimately passed. You may even remember that last hearing was sort of a quasi-virtual / in-person session in Cheyenne, and they had a hard stop. They hadn't gotten to anything, and they just literally packed up and walked away from all of the work that they had done that year. So we didn't see really any of that legislation come into the 2025 season. But as Ashley mentioned, you saw folks like Representative Filer starting to come forward, and he's going to be an important player, like it or not, moving forward in some of this area. He brought at least half a dozen different pieces of legislation the last 2 years around continuity of permitting, notices for zoning changes. He brought the Fast Track Permit Act twice. And ultimately, Ashley and team did a really good job of getting that to a decent place.
Right, if we pause right
Yeah,
there.
please.
Okay, so I think it's really important because you guys just see, and I can imagine in your spot, a lot of this regulation coming at you. And by the way, we named it not regulatory reduction, we named it regulatory addition committee because it seemed like for every one they removed, we got like 3 more rules. And I started in the fall of 2024, was right during the wrap up of that committee, thankfully, because I think I would have lost it watching it the whole time. So I went right into the fire with that. We had a bunch of new legislators that were young guns, especially Lee Filer. He was a little more experienced because he served before. But together with him and Rob Geringer, who's a representative, who's a former city engineer, which was like really kind of alarming to us. Because he was one of us, and then he was bringing all these like regulatory burdensome, we felt administratively heavy legislation to us. We were able to really defend it and kill all the toxic regulatory legislation that came in 2025. When we killed his fast track permitting, And it was really fun. City of Cheyenne showed up with all their like stuff for fast track, what it would take to fast track a corporate and industrial space and all their paper. It was like, there's no way to, no one size fits all. So I told him, I'm like, I'm killing your bill, but if we kill it, let's figure out how we can work through this together. And so buying that trust with him on fast track permits, we talked him off the ledge with residential. So Charles Bloom, who will pick on him because he's not here. This is great. So literally we gavelled out, and then literally the next day, whiplash, we're already talking about this bill again, and we're in the City of Cheyenne offices, who has probably some, and you guys tell me, but from what I understand, some of the most intensive regulations. So Charles was a really great one to crawl through that bill. And him and I really worked hard with Filer and crew to come to a consensus. Everybody, it's not perfect. No legislation ever is. And if everybody's a little burned, feeling like they're a little burned walking out, it's usually somewhere in the middle. You know, I think it's gonna be good for our developers, and where we can attract developers and be like, hey, you did this in Riverton, well, you can do the same thing over in Lander, or you can do it up in DuBois, or, you know, wherever you're going. It's a standard process. So you know that Wyoming wants housing here. So we felt really proud of that legislation. And if we're gonna need tweaks on it, we can go back and tweak it. But we're hopeful that we were very thoughtful about that. And more than anything is, you might see this as, you know, the tree. Jeremiah and I are working in the forest of all the political ins and outs, and do know for that one bill that got through, that bought us about 12 bills that were very terrible that we were able to kill. Does that make sense to everybody in the political landscape?
Yeah, Ashley's right. If you look at that landscape that I just talked about, we have one bill make it through during that time frame. And by and large, it's a good bill. You all helped us get it to a good spot. Certainly there are pieces of it that I did not like. In fact, I told our lobbyist to go and take care of it. And you know, Ashley, I think, was right to say, hey, we've gotten it to a good place. Perhaps we can come back and clean that up. Let's not, destroy a relationship that is likely to be there for a while. And again, it's one bill over the course of 3 or 4 sessions, which kind of brings us to where we are today, looking at this legislative interim. And, really appreciate Joy and the team bringing forward the fencing issue that is important to many of you. And Joy and Melissa will be before the Joint Agricultural Committee here in a couple of weeks. That's a place where I was able to work with committee leadership to carve the space out for you guys to have that conversation with them. In fact, they didn't even have it on their agenda for you all to participate here in a couple of weeks. And I made a couple of phone calls and we carved that time for you. So I'm very hopeful. I will be behind the scenes supporting you all as you bring that forward to the Joint Ag Committee, and we'll do my part. That said, I would really encourage you, particularly the county folks, to work with a couple of the legislators that are on that committee. Senator Crago comes to mind. That committee is really odd, and let's be honest, not necessarily the most educated committee around a lot of these issues, and perhaps doesn't have the bandwidth to become educated. So you're going to have to really leverage those that are really in the know. And Senator Crago comes to mind. So if you're a Johnson County, Sheridan County, City of Buffalo person, you ought to be connecting with him, and I'll work with him. I would also encourage those that are in the Bighorn Basin. You have Representative Banks, a young gentleman, but quite frankly, I think somebody that one is trying to do good and wants to get a win. And if you can help him get a legislative win, he's gonna appreciate
Yeah.
that long term. So
Angela, can I pull up the screen on here? Okay, I was just gonna pull up the committee so they could look at
Yeah.
the faces.
Yep, please do. There are some others on there. Davis, Hornstrom, Love is a developer, so he's gonna have some interest in these sorts of topics. Leverage those. I think that they're pretty good legislators, but it's again, a tough committee. And I know I'm kind of dancing around that a little bit, but let's be honest, it is a.
And you know, I think one thing too is we are, I think everybody knows, we're in a really crazy primary year. That in August, there's gonna be a lot of changes. A lot of people are not rerunning, a lot of new faces are coming on. There's a big movement to I would politically correct say maybe stabilize the legislature with some more thoughtful candidates that are not just burn it down, cut everything. They understand the role of government. And so I'm pretty excited about some people that are running. And then not only that, we have a big change in administration coming at the SLIB level. So new governor, there's, you know, 2 choices for Secretary of State. One I'll plug is a county commissioner, Robert Short, that we're pretty excited is running. Neither Jeremiah or I endorse anyone, but it's just information for you to consider. Secretary of State, Treasurer, Kurt Meyer, and then Scott Smith's running, and not Megan Degenfelder. Well, she's running for governor. Christy Racinas is auditor, and then education would be Harshman, Chad Auer, and Tom Kelly. So anyways, there's a lot of moving parts with SLIB, and we know with our funding how important that SLIB board is as well on our big projects. So a lot of what we're doing right now is trying to plan internally, because I feel like the deck chairs are all going to change September 1st. We'll know a lot more. So, but I would say for sure, Craig-O, back to this list. Bob Davis is running again. Hornstrom probably, he doesn't have an opponent right now. All very reasonable. Tap Love, same thing.
So that moving on from fencing and joint ag exactions, again, I mentioned that earlier. I think it's a big thing. You and I haven't talked since your trip up to Jackson this week. Anything you want to in that area?
So again, we're trying to be very proactive. So we don't have, the worst thing that happens to us is, and not to pick on Teton County, but we're going to pick on Teton County. Which by the way, I love going to, like it was a great trip this week. But it seems like Jackson and Cheyenne for my membership brought me a lot of one size fits all legislation this year. And so my goal is to be proactive and mitigate that. So we don't, so if we can solve that locally, they're not forcing us from the state to figure it out. And so, myself and Jeremiah's lobbyist, who also represents the Teton County Commissioners, Nick Agopian, were up there this week and individually met. We met together, but individually with the city, with the county, with the legislators to understand where the landscape, where it was. And so everybody knows housing is super expensive there. They're saying basically it's $1,000 a square foot with the land price. So you're building a 2,700 square foot home. It's 2.7 million for an entry point into the market. And there's a lot of hurt feelings around that, especially for people that were born and raised in Jackson. And it's forcing a lot of great people and long-term residents out of the community, and the landscape's changing. So just with that change, there's just a lot of emotion around that. Not only that, they have, a national park in their backyard, and a lot of natural, your NROs I learned all about, and natural spaces that you have to mitigate, and all the ground that's shovel ready, it's almost all gone. So it's just super expensive to build, and they want to, as a mountain town, Jackson's the only mountain town in our state. So like that literally has a ski slope inside the town. Like a Vail or Aspen. So they're just super unique, and most mountain town standards are trying to keep 20% of their workforce within the state. Well, since Jackson is so isolated, they have a goal of 65%, and they're there, which is kind of amazing. But to mitigate that, I walked around, I looked at all the affordable housing that they've been working on, and that has terrible headlines at the state level to show. I have a really cute picture of the Flat Creek apartments with little kid trikes outside, saying this is not the slums of New York, because that's what our legislators are thinking. These are true working family homes. And we have to figure out ways to subsidize that, because if we want this lifestyle here and we want to retain some of our Wyoming people to be able to work in Wyoming jobs, and we're talking about city planners, and that might be married to a police officer, or someone that manages the front desk at the Wart, so we all know tourism jobs are great, but they don't pay a ton either. A lot of it's service industry. And so to have those people here, it's got to be a community solution. So they started with these fees. I kept asking the question to every group, what are we solving for? What are we solving for? And it's to retain our workforce. And so how do we do that? And so basically we need money to subsidize. Now, whether that's a fee through the developer or nobody shoot me, but we started talking about a real estate transfer tax. What if it was the opt-in real estate transfer tax, and that money for Teton County specifically went to that, and then we get rid of these fees. So there's a lot of different things out there that we're exploring, along with the mitigation fees. Now with the exaction fees for the residential, they've talked about shoring it up. The commissioners have along standardizing it with fast track permits. So everything 3,000 and below has no fees attached. And so the city, I'm pushing on them really hard. And by the way, Jackson is a city, not a town. Even though they call themselves a town, they are a first-class city. The town of Jackson, council members are ready to work with the county commissioners, which is one of the things I was really trying to facilitate. Because basically Jeremiah and I will deal with the fallout of this in January if we don't get there. And so we're trying to facilitate that conversation of standardizing that together at the residential level. It seems like the pinch point right now, so Jeremiah is getting updated because we haven't had a chance to visit, is residential and not commercial. The developers that are coming in, it was really fun to walk around the town of Jackson and see all the things going on. I mean, their planners, who's Teton? Okay. So I met with all your planners, county and city, because I didn't see any of them here. The head of the planning department in Jackson was saying just developers calling nonstop, like, hey, where can I, so where can I develop? Where can I develop? And I'm like, hey, send them down to Cheyenne. We got a lot of stuff that needs to happen, or Laramie, right? I know all of you guys are foaming at the mouth jealous. And so they don't care. Like, they're just ready to go. And so the commercial part doesn't seem to be as much of a problem or a barrier, and nobody was whining about that. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to be more proactive about, because and if there's things like this bubbling in your community, if you can let us know beforehand, it's a lot easier for us, if you need us, to come and help talk to the electeds ahead of time, instead of us being slammed with crazy legislation in January for reacting through.
And to bring the exaction conversation back to all the rest of you, depending on the iteration of the bill that has been brought forward, they have included other sorts of exactions that some of you may be imposing, whether that's for recreation or for emergency services in some of your communities. Those will be impacted by this legislation. So that's why we're working to try and work around the edges. I'll be honest. You all saw Checkgate happen this last legislative session, did you not? Okay. That one single issue is the only reason that we don't have a prohibition against housing exactions in Teton County, or anywhere else in the state for that matter. And that bill was only getting worse by the minute as it sat there and they worked some elements of it. So that's why we're trying to proactively go to our members and say, hey, you're either gonna do something or you're not gonna have that.
Or you're gonna be told, and like, we just literally can't
Yeah.
stop it.
I will not be the guy, I will not, despite however much armor I put on, we will not stop that train if there's nothing done. And again, my intention is to protect everybody else that, needs to have this sort of a tool at the local level for addressing issues.
And back to the political landscape, Jeremiah and I did have a lot of really awesome wins together this last year. Well, in the last couple of years, one was the investment of funds that you had worked on forever. So we were able to, even though that passed on the ballot, it took a lot for us to get that. We passed the direct distribution, so we never have to go sit in hard chairs and joint appropriations again. That's selfishly, but more importantly, reliable funding and stable funding for our local governments. As it's eroded over the last 20 years, that was a huge, huge win. We're working on consensus block grant funding. Was anybody around 2015 or before and worked in the consensus block grant funding? Wow. Okay. So we can explain that concept, but basically it goes to 23 counties and together, and you're going to see a lot of regionalization push coming from the state, which is really cool. That I think it's going to be more grassroots driven from the ground up instead of them coming from the state down. And that's what we've been advocating for. So they're going to, we don't know what the number is yet. That's what we're trying to negotiate. But just using a simple number, say it's 100 million divided by 23, it's kind of like the Madden formula. There'll be a formula of how each county gets their piece of the pie. And then the cities, towns, and counties all have to be in consensus of how they use that infrastructure development funding, which worked really well when Jeremiah and I were both in previous positions. And I was an economic developer in Goshen County, and you were the governor's office at that point. So I'm part of driving that policy from the state level. It worked really well for our communities, and it really made them work together and think strategically about investment in infrastructure and community development. So like that's, you got to remember, there's just there's a lot of other things at stake that we're trying to manage our portfolio of work. I mean, obviously we have different things we work on that impact both of our bodies a little bit differently, but there's a lot of stuff that's bridging between both of our organizations right now. One of the other things is school facilities. Was that on your list?
It was not.
Okay.
Joy and team have
Yeah.
covered for me last week.
Yeah.
Don't know how that went.
So school facilities, were you there?
I was there.
Oh,
Okay.
Angela did.
They had a proposed legislation, or potential legislation where they kind of want to be treated differently than commercial development. Which is understandable, like they were saying, commercial development is there for the money, they're making money, schools are not.
Right.
And there's a lot of requirements that increase the cost of schools, and so they're looking at ways to decrease the cost of building schools and remodeling.
I was already double booked. My lobbyist, Jason Beggar, was going to be there. He had a death in the family. And then a couple mayors that were really passionate about this, that wanted to be involved in that conversation, were not able to call in either. So we submitted a ton of written comments because they're preempted from all of our zoning regulations, which is problematic as well, I'm sure you know. So I've been talking with Senator Landon, who's the chairman. They want to make sure it's friendly to us. So we have a lot of leeway there. But that's like another thing that's, all of a sudden in front of us. I think that's for the positive that we could shape. And I think they're being proactive as well. But yeah, so this is we're just trying to explain there's all these different things we're balancing all the time.
One thing I think we're both working through, and you all are likely doing the same, is around data centers, emerging technologies, industrial siting. If you're not aware, and we've been trying to host some educational sessions for commissioners so that they understand that entire landscape, both all the way from permitting up to what the developers would like to see. it is just coming at us so rapidly, and we're trying to dissect that. One of the things that seems to be in play is that if your community wants data center development, the companies are going to require that you have an established industrial zone. Why do they want that? Well, that gets them around the industrial siting process. And some communities are fine with that. Others, want them to go through the industrial siting process. One of my elements of concern and work is to ensure that if a community does set up an industrial zone and says that's where you want these things to take place, that you have the ability still to negotiate with those companies for the other land use needs that you might have, road infrastructure, water, sewer, et cetera. But we're seeing lots of flat points out there and trying to work with the whole industry.
Yeah, and so the county hasn't cited one yet. They've all been in Cheyenne. So there's 3 campuses in Cheyenne. There's 3 under construction plus a couple other in the works. So there's 6 total. There's not, just so we myth bust in here too, and we would appreciate you helping us with this. There's not 170 or 70, I don't know, there's some crazy number floating around Cheyenne. There is 6. That's it right now. And with the contractual agreements within the industrial zones in Cheyenne, they don't get off of the industrial siting. It just actually, it's great for everyone in this room and the rest of our membership because it puts us in the driver's seat and takes the state out of it. And so when Cheyenne did their first agreement with Microsoft and just recently with Meta, it's an 86-page document of here's what you're responsible for, here's what we're responsible for. And it's just like what you guys do every day. There's not power here. You're going to have to get the power to it, or we're going to charge you X amount of dollars. There's no road here. And they've been amazing partners, and that has not been a problem. And if you watch Select Water, did anybody geek out and watch Select Water? So we were in, I'm probably not as prepared today because we've just come off a heavy initial interim legislative session. We prepared a huge presentation to the Select Water Committee a week ago, and the mayor of Cheyenne testified for about an hour of like, I will do no harm to my community. We need, we can't have these entities come on if we don't have the water to sell them. Actually, Board of Public Utilities in Laramie County has a lot of water to sell. And so this actually keeps our rates down of having these data centers on. And by the way, it's all on closed loop systems. So they're not continuing to pull from the water. Once they get filled, it's just like the use of 8 residential homes in a year, or pivot of on a agricultural land. So that this industrial siting loophole, I shouldn't say that out loud. The industrial siting specific for data centers is really great for us because it puts you in the driver's seat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to be clear, and I wasn't trying to suggest the companies could get out of everything. They can only get out of the state process and the state impact assistance funds. They are still, beholden to any process that you all want to have in place. And so, yes, absolutely.
And while we're on water, one of the things that WAM was specifically asked, and it will by location impact the counties, but with Joint Appropriations Committee, somehow Jeremiah and I really have their ear. And I was talking to them specifically in the economic development vein that we have so many water issues that if we could fix, if we had a better fund for water and water development, as far as like sewers, wastewater, just regular water, water treatment facilities, for growth, like Kemmer's facing that, who's Lincoln County. Yeah. So you can write the song on this, so sewer is a huge thing and we got to figure out how to fund your sewer lagoons. So they're, outside of our normal funding sources, they're looking at putting together, they're looking for our needs. And I've got a survey out to all my membership right now seeing what those water infrastructure needs are. And they passed, Taft Love, who's very passionate on this, and I think is gonna be a really good senator, passed there's like 2 water infrastructure study bills that are coming. One's a huge one that's gonna take 4 years. Because a lot of it is like, we don't know what we don't know. And so, together with those studies, and they're trying to get something up because it will take 4 years immediately, that there's more funding available for water development. There's a pathway there that's pretty exciting. So,
Do you have any more kind of current issues?
yeah, so minerals, industrial siting, there's a lot of conversation going on there. Are you guys following that at all?
A little bit.
Okay, so there's one bill that's coming up on impact assistant payments, prepayments and bonding. And both Jeremiah and I have 2 members in Natrona County, well, the Mills mayor and Natrona County commissioner, that are wanting to push on the companies to bond to upfront the payments. I think that's the wrong way. It will die. It will die 1,000 deaths by 1,000 different companies. They hate it. But we have this trust we've built with the legislature. They're like, well, we understand you need to front load some of these costs. So they're talking about, instead of bonding, that they can just front the sales tax portion of that. There's no need for that. So that conversation's coming June 4th and 5th. And then also an industrial siting mineral processing facility exemption. So do we have Campbell County up here in here? Okay, so they have a lot of coal, like revamping of coal right now. And so they would have the exemption if it's already been cited in. They don't have to go through that process again because the land's been mitigated. And so they wanted to be on the exemption list. So that conversation will be going on. Just see. I didn't know about that fencing. So you'll have to fill me in. HHR, that doesn't impact everyone, but it's something that this group should be aware of, especially with zoning. So historic horse racing, Jeremiah worked on it way before I started, and then the last 2 years since I started, this has been one of our top priorities, is figuring out the local authorization for historic horse racing. Basically how it starts is the county ballots on it and decides if they just want to allow it in the county, right? So then they check yes or no. Some have been okayed since the 60s and haven't done anything about it. And then once they ballot on it, then it used to be the commissioners just said, okay, you can come, right? And there was no teeth to it. And so now, and then it was really problematic for the municipalities because these historic horse racings, specifically in Cheyenne and Casper, were buying land or old bars, seemed to be their business model all over the cities, and just really oddly placed, where Cheyenne was trying to zone them into like a Western gaming space on the west edge and then south of town. So it was so they could keep it corralled and not eat up our main streets that are historic in nature and are beautiful. And a lot of us don't really want to see a deadwood, and that's, depending on the community. And so with this bill coming through, you still should be looking at your zoning, even if you don't have it. But if it's authorized in your county, you should still be looking at your zoning on this. And then know that it's going to be like a liquor license process is the best way I can describe it. July 1st, you, especially in the municipalities, will be the up or down on the local authorization for simulcasting within your borders of where they can be placed. So that was a huge win for us. We worked really hard with the industry, and then we didn't see eye to eye for a while. We got on the same page. But we will have a panel on that on June 1st at 10 a.m. So your communities can start getting ready for that.
Yeah, Joy.
How does the community find out if they do allow it?
Where's that list?
I could get that list to you. I believe it is 7.
Yeah, it's on the
counties currently authorized.
gaming commission website.
The gaming commission.
Mhm. We'll get you that link along with these webinars.
And then I have a second question. Can a community blanket prohibit data centers?
Just like it's a private property thing.
I think ultimately, if you went through your proper planning and zoning processes, there would be a way to perhaps exclude it to its most extent. I don't know if you can do it outright. You certainly couldn't without going through the land use process, would be my assessment.
A lot of this too, so there's a couple trains of thoughts going on with this. One is we're trying to mitigate the state legislature having any involvement on this. We want these decisions to be locally driven, because some communities are fine with them, and we're fine with them for a long time, until some, I feel, outside noise has infiltrated, ironically, through the platform that they're whining about, which is social media. And so, as you guys know, it's all about zoning and planning and where they're properly located. That there is a do no harm aspect to it. I think if a private land developer or private land owner is selling their land, like, we can't stop that. But the zoning, if the land is in a zoned area that prohibits that space, that's what I think where.
Yeah, I think
You can work
ultimately
through.
you can zone it out, but if you haven't gone through the zoning process, you cannot
You can't stop that
ultimately
transaction.
prohibit it. I do think, if the question was, what about a moratorium? Is that possible? And I don't know municipal planning and zoning to the extent that all of you do. On the county side, yes, you could impose a moratorium long enough that you could go through the process to zone out. You cannot put a long-term or permanent moratorium in place without going through planning and zoning. We know this, actually, there's a case from your county that would demonstrate that ability doesn't. It went all the way to the Wyoming Supreme Court, and they said, no, without going through zoning, you cannot ultimately just put in a permanent moratorium.
I think there's a lot of misinformation right now about data centers. And I think if you're the average citizen or even the average planner, you don't really know where to go to get the facts.
We're
And
working
so,
on that.
Yeah, and people trusting, right, who says they are the fact holder, I think is difficult right now too. And so I know in Park County, we're going through our reg amendments right now. We're just about to put out our first draft of our use table, and it's going to be very interesting because the data center topic is so on fire right now. We have no idea what to expect. Well, we do. We know to expect a polarized answer because that's Park County right now. It's
Right.
50 everything, so nobody's going to agree. But there's some people that just want them absolutely prohibited. We don't ever want to see them in Park County. And then we've got the property rights, people should be able to do what they want. It's trash. It's going to be very interesting where our board lands, in particular on those issues, utilities, renewables, all those types of things. I just don't know how we're gonna. If we have a commissioner that says if everybody's angry, then we're doing it right because we found the middle ground.
Yeah, well, that's what we kind of feel with legislation sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. So
So with Cheyenne, when they did their industrial park for the first campuses that came out with Microsoft, they're way out there. And honestly, when some land developers were looking at putting housing right next to them, the community was like, you better think through this, because if you start growing that way, it's just like, do you want to go right next to a refinery? They zone this. This is going to be industrial use. And so because housing is just, exploding everywhere, and especially with Cheyenne, with the runoff up the Front Range, they just started throwing housing developments everywhere, right? And so now those people are like, oh, I had these big scenic open views, not looking at the zoning land use that they bought into. And we could have solved this probably with better, a little more structured planning, I guess, around it. And that's why planning, I know I'm preaching to the choir, that's why planning matters, right? So that's part of the problem with some of the Cheyenne residents that were upset about the current situation. Now, the ones that live out there, they're not complaining about noise because anytime there's been a noise issue, they've like fixed it immediately. The water, they're not looking at the reports from Board of Public Utilities. And so that was what Select Water gave us that platform with lots of people coming to testify and provide the actual data of the actual water consumption for us to try to myth bust it. And then same with the energy use. There has to be an energy plan. Otherwise they can't come. Like we can't serve them if there's not that energy available. But I can tell you, everybody's concerned about the ratepayer in both water and energy rates. And yesterday at corporations, Black Hills Energy got up and said, we want more data centers. This keeps our, the more we put on that load, the less we pay in the long run because we're a low populated state. So, I mean, it's just so crazy, the myths that are out there right now around it. We are working with industry. We're working obviously with City of Cheyenne Leads, and the companies and all levels of government. This is what's even wilder about this. For our, 50 Shades of Red state, this is a MAGA push of like being AI dominant and beating China to this. And so there's a lot of like national security around these AI centers, which is we're asking for the feds for help of like, can you please explain to, people how this isn't like a conspiracy. The conspiracy is them trying to infiltrate us, slowing development down. Because everywhere else in the world, this is happening, like it's a race for information. I mean, think about how many times you're using data a day, right? So if we slow down development, it's going to be a pay to play on data usage, because it's just powering everything, which, okay, but, and if it doesn't go here, it's going to go somewhere else in the country. But it is wild with my network of state directors that are municipal state leagues. This is definitely the conversation with all 50 states right now. It's really weird. It's really weird. And people are more excited about nuclear and wind all of a sudden, which I think is strange.
So with that water, misinformation about the water, because that's what I hear about in Cheyenne, that there's not enough water there. They weren't able to even get information from the companies as to how much they were going to use, which I don't understand how that could be, but so they've obviously have learned and seen what exactly these data centers are doing to the utilities and what have you. So did they get started off and on the right foot, or has it been?
They've been there for 20 years. That's what's crazy. There's been no problem till the last 3 months of misinformation flooding the internet.
Yeah, I mean, as Ashley said, it's been there for a really long time. And certainly the early iterations of data centers were water intensive. If we're really brutally honest about it, that was the reality of the early systems to get the cooling in particular in place. They've evolved, as we've seen many industries do over time, knowing that that's a major issue, and they've gone to these closed loop systems where they're just constantly reusing that water. And as Ashley said, of the data centers that do exist in City of Cheyenne, Erie County, they're using less than 1 center pivot of water per year. And in a way, that's really important for the Board of Public Utilities in Cheyenne, because just a few years ago, they lost Holly Frontier, at least a large load off of Holly Frontier, which without a replacement, that means all of us users are going to be paying increased rates to try and maintain the system. And now we have some industrial users, although it's at a small rate, are coming in to help, help sustain the system. So I will say that the data center, universe has changed in the last 3 months. There's been this misinformation. It may be born in old systems, and we have to do a better job of explaining it today. I did want to add one other thing to Joy's question, and I mentioned this earlier. If you don't want data center development in your community, particularly with the companies that we have right now, they're all saying that they're only coming if
Yeah.
you've established an industrial zone, whether that's in the city or in the county. So if you haven't established one of those zones for them, they're not coming to you. That's why you see, you probably saw the news about Converse County. That tried, they don't have planning and zoning in Converse County. And the only way that you can get that exemption from the state industrial siting process is to have those zones. So they decided to just establish these zones outside of the planning process. And I will admit, I told them I didn't think that that was possible. And sounds like the Attorney General backed me up. And they've had to rescind that. So in all likelihood, Converse County is not going to see data center development.
I talked to them yesterday, but no, they have to reestablish it.
Oh, yeah,
They have to go through the right
have to
process,
go
but they
through-
didn't do it because of public outcry. They just did it wrong.
So, yes, sir.
So I feel like you kind of said like that we're moving back towards energy reduction of nuclear and potentially wind. Are we hearing from
So
the state
it's-
legislature that they're more open to wind, or because I mean,
Who we
Rocktown
talking to?
Power removed wind production from their facilities.
I just saw it on, because I've been watching all the social media comments to understand where people are, and I hate it. Like minutes of my life I never get back, but yeah, and like all the chat, I mean, you can see the chat bots on there. It's wild because I'm like, is this a real person? Because there's a lot of like smiles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like not Ashley Harp Street, what are you doing? So, but the people with concerns are like, I'd rather see nuclear development. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like we're rating this now. So I don't know. It's just like people want to be mad. And I don't even think they know what it's like a toddler. They don't even know what they're mad about. They need a nap. Like, or they need a snack or something,
I would say you've got the woke wind caucus, right? That
Yeah.
is saying they don't want any of this.
Yeah. It's a very NIMBY, not in my backyard. And a lot of retirees that have moved here. I'm here. So I was just in Alpine and, so yeah, North Lincoln County, as you guys know, it's so different, right? From south to north. And so north, Alpine was kind of the sleepy community that's on fire right now, because of a lot of the Teton County traffic, moving over. And, so there's just a weird thing going on in Alpine with billionaires and workers and then all these retirees that have come there and they're like, well, I came here to retire and I want this vista and landscape. Well, I hate to tell you, if you want it, you gotta buy all of it. Your 1 acre does not secure the thousands of acres around you unless you're butt up to a national park and go over to Teton County and you can buy your $5 million acre over there and secure that vista and landscape. So, I mean, honestly, it comes back down to private property rights. And that's where at the SLIB level with, funding these big projects or selling the land at the state land stage of the game. I feel like Treasurer Meyer and Governor Gordon are the only adults in the room of like it or not, this is private property rights. Like they can do what they want on, are we going to start outlawing cows? Because they do that in California. I know that sounds crazy here. But I've seen a lot of like pushback of, so I have a farm in Goshen County and I'm seeing some of my farming friends of like, farmland's only for data centers. It's like, well, they're not looking for farmland. And back to the company thing, they're not going to come because they're coming in to talk to us about like which communities are set up and ready and which communities are set up and ready and which communities want them there. They're not going to come where they're not wanted. And so I think the people can cry to that, like, don't come here. We don't want you. That worked with Radiant, in Bar None, ironically with a contingency that did not live in Bar None. So it's mushy and messy. We're trying to work on, both Jeremiah and I, on lots of different issues are trying to work on better messaging and secure places to put that messaging that people trust and working, also to, back to the fast track permits of like, instilling the trust back into local government and us being forward facing and business facing and residential facing and if you don't like it, vote new local electeds in, but I challenge any of them, as you know, to come run for office because it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, so on the electrical side of a data center, I think the one requirement that we should have is that they're self-powered. And if they're taking power off of the grid, then if we look at projections across the nation, that is just going higher and higher. And we don't have the power for it.
Yeah, so Wyoming actually has the regulatory system that those new users have to bear the cost of their addition. So it doesn't have a bearing on us as individuals. And that's a place where Wyoming was really proactive many years ago. But also to your point, you do see a number of the companies that are coming forward proposing cogeneration right next to their facilities. If you look at the Tallgrass project in Laramie County, they're going to be using locally sourced natural gas to power their system and ultimately the tenant that will house the data center there. And I think we'll see more of that happening over time. But to the extent that individual citizens are worried about rates, our legislature was proactive many years ago, and Black Hills, give them a big credit, have also built in those firewalls to ensure that those new industrial users pay the cost of that.
I think you're right, other than the rest of the nations do the same model. Because I mean, you just look at some of these, like the one that went up in Nevada, that's 40,000 square acres. They're generating their own power, but their power consumption is equal to the whole state of Utah.
So they talked about that yesterday in corporations. It's worth going back to listen to of the usage and I can't remember. It's like 3 gigawatts. Is that right?
I didn't hear it.
Yeah. I get confused in power, but like whatever our amount is, 3 whatever's, some of this stuff is like 1.5. So yeah, it would be half the state's power. You're absolutely right. And they've absolutely mitigated that. The problem lies in some of the territorial stuff for our current businesses. So really data centers, the energy thing is kind of a moot point.
I look at it as opportunity to the extent that those other states mess it up and we do it right.
Yeah,
we're going to be the ones that win in that equation.
They want to self-gen. They want to self-generate.
I just think it should be mandatory across the whole nation. I don't know if they all get that. I'm glad that we do.
Yeah.
But as that power consumption goes up on the national grid, then power cost is going to go up for residents. It's just going to happen. So, I mean, it's nice, but I'm glad that we're doing it.
One thing to switch topics, unless you guys had any more data center questions, because I know we could talk for a long time on that. Is one thing we'd like to be proactive on, and I bet Derek will jump out of his seat with excitement on this, is TIP. Does anybody use tax increment financing? Heard about it? It's a tool that Cheyenne has used for, and Laramie, you're kind of dabbling in it. We know that there needs to be some cleanup in it statutorily. We were almost there 2 years ago, and then the corporations committee that is primarily on the House side, bless you, Freedom Caucus was like, we just don't like this because it's tax increment financing and it has tax in the word, even though that's not really the point of it. So they just couldn't get their minds wrapped around it, even though there's some simple cleanups. It's what Utah Economic Development's doing and why they've been so successful. Also, it's going to be interesting with the People's Initiative to see what happens with that. If there's a 50% reduction on residential, where the property tax conversation goes. We believe it's slowing down, but we do have a gubernatorial candidate that wants to eradicate that. So Brett Bean, that's his platform. So it's still out there. The conversation's still out there, but if property tax hopefully stabilizes and we find a metric that everybody feels like it's back to a stable tax, and we realize It's that and sales tax for us because we don't have an income tax. It's a great tool to use. And so we're hopeful, we brought it to corporations again. They didn't want to touch it, but we have a couple of individual sponsors that would like to play with that, or play with it, would like to, attempt cleaning that up. Also like that abandoned bill that, Trey Sherwood, keeps running. I told her to keep running that. I mean, that could help you guys immensely. So if you have any housing thoughts on bills that would make your life easier, let us know, because I want to have like a laundry list of, because I'm getting asked now by, especially by candidates that are strong, or people that are strong in there, like your Lee Filers and Rob Geringers and Tap Love. They have this like little, and Justin Fornstrom, who's a former mayor from Pine Bluffs, this strong coalition of like wanting to be forward thinking. They're like, have those ready, Ashley, because if it changes, we're going to run some stuff that's going to be helpful instead of harmful.
Yeah, I'm glad that. Go ahead, Joy.
Well, what's coming down from the feds, because they're the whole housing thing at the federal level, what's gonna happen now? It's gonna trickle down to us. You know, because they're really focusing on housing and making it nearly impossible, obviously, for local governments to do anything, that they really just want these things to pass through. What's gonna happen if?
So specifically, like what's making it, that's a hindrance.
So there's been a lot of notice lately. Let me see if I can find the name of it quick. It passed. It's the road, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. It just passed the US House. And I think it's moving on. And if that passes, it's my understanding there could be some implications that are going to trickle down to the states. And obviously our local government entities as well. So we've kind of been sort of looking at that a little bit to see what could shake down.
So I don't know specifically, our lobbyist in DC has not flagged that for us. They're more concerned about the transportation bill, which is interesting to me because for National League of Cities, that's who are, just like Jeremiah uses NACO. They are like dog on a bone with housing because that is the #1 issue in every state, every community. So I don't know, like, that's what I'm like, what's the specifics?
Like to know, you know, if you guys have any insight, if you find anything out.
Well, and if you can give me the specifics of what's trickling down, that's bad. I can't, when these bills that are thousands of pages, like I have to be able to point to.
Yeah, I think again, it has to do with limiting regulatory authority.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, see, that's more helpful. Yes, and that is one thing with the fast track permits that looking ahead, it's like if we didn't put something in place, it's back to the exaction conversation. Something's going to be put in place for us. Like Illinois is trying to completely strip it. Colorado's been working on that as well. Colorado municipal leagues have been pushing back on that, and are in lawsuits over that. And so we're on that. I just don't think they can preempt us the way that they think they can. But we'll keep for sure fighting on that.
Yeah, Joy, I'm not aware of that either, and I'll happily contact NACO. And you're certainly welcome to use NACO as well.
Yeah.
We pay for all county officials, and that's not just elected officials, it's all to be able to access their resources.
And same with National League of Cities for any of the municipal planners here. We've paid for everybody's membership as well.
You know, kind of on that line of thinking, the way I wanted to really close this out is that, you know, we've been on the defensive collectively over the course of the past 7 or so years on a lot of these issues. I think we've carved some space more recently, and it maybe even as part of a never let a, you know, bad issue go to waste. It can become an crisis go to waste. It can become an opportunity, as some legislators are worried about wind and nuclear and data centers, et cetera. They're now looking to us and to you and saying, what can you do to help us? So I would really encourage you to go on the offensive and begin to identify places where you think that a law could change for the better to help you do your job, or you need resources. I'm excited to hear about what WAM's got going with the permitting, software and resource. We might have the opportunity to go to the legislature and get you that sort of thing embedded locally, because they do want to see things happen more timely, that a developer can go in and see where their project is in the queue, and to the extent that we can help as part of that, let us know. I really do think that we're in a good spot moving forward. And when we're doing that, it helps to distract them from, or keep them from doing stupid things. To the extent that you don't think that you have the people that can go talk down there, one, don't believe that narrative. You've got good people. Many of you are here in the room, and Melissa is wonderful. And then leverage our associations and other associations to do that work. So that's where I would close it for me.
Yeah, no, and I think I was going to close with the same. When you guys have your legislative visit this afternoon with Melissa, like, how can we help you? And it's better if we also know, I mean, we know that sometimes we might not all be aligned, even within our own memberships, right? But it's also best that we know where we are aligned, and say, hey, we're not aligned on this, and they're going to do their thing, and that's fine, because I don't want you to water it. I don't want to water you down, but you don't want to water down the strength and the goodwill that we've built, because when you want to use us, you want to make sure that's intact. So I just think us being aware, if you're running something we're not going to be a part of, or maybe we don't even agree with, I think that's really good. But I would say let's try to more focus on what we can do together. And I think we could get a lot more done. I think regardless of what happens in the election, Jeremiah and I have oddly built a lot of weird goodwill. So, and have some strange alliances that they are absolutely coming to us. I had Tony Locke come to me yesterday about some things that I don't think he would have 2 years ago. Was like, well, you're kind of the gold standard. So if you like it, then I know I can get it through everybody else. So they know that we're carrying a powerful punch, but also realize that we are trying to do the best for our communities. So, and just let us know how we can help you, and communicate often.
Happy to take some more questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Neely. I'm the planner in Sublette County, so I'm relatively new in the position. I am curious your thoughts about state parcels. I have recalled that there was possibly a bill about counties needing to identify which parcels are of value to the county, and I'm just curious, like, whatever happened with that bill, and how did that stem to come about?
Yeah, so that bill did not receive an introduction. That was a bill that Senator Bill Landon out of Detrona County brought, and it intended for counties to identify state parcels that, and it had some criteria that you could identify it essentially for protection, or at least additional consideration from the legislature or from the State Loan and Investment Board. Sorry, let me get my boards correct. The Board of Land Commissioners from ultimately considering those issues as they made leasing decisions. That legislation didn't receive its introductory vote, so it didn't move forward this last year. I will admit that bill had some major problems. One, it revived an old program essentially that had existed at one point in Wyoming's history called the rare and uncommon lands. So local governments, the state could identify these places, these landscapes in the state, and designate them as rare and uncommon. The last of them to be designated were down in Sweetwater County. That obviously became an issue for industry. Oddly enough, industry on some level supported Senator Landon's bill. My own personal issue with it from the association perspective is it was and I will say that this was a bill that the governor actually supported. But for us, it was a diversion of saying, we don't want the people to have to come to the Board of Land Commissioners and bitch to us. We want to go send them to the Board of County Commissioners and have them bitch to them and designate these places, which my members weren't going to go for. So I don't see that particular issue coming back. There was an alternative bill submitted by Senator Guru at the same time, which would have, he was intending to give counties more authority in the zoning of those state parcels. I don't think his bill went in the right direction. I actually had an amendment for him to try and get where he wanted to go. It too didn't receive support on introduction. It is also one that the governor opposes because he thinks it's unconstitutional. I disagree. I think that the Supreme Court has said that the legislature can designate what the process is for leasing of state lands, and part of that can be that that counties have some say in that process. But regardless, it didn't move forward. I suspect if it had made it through, the governor would have vetoed it. Don't know what would happen after that, but I'm sensing, at least in the short term, that thing is not going to come forward. That said, there's been enough issues with state parcels, whether it's Teton County, Natrona County, Sheridan County. There are a handful of them across the state that have become flashpoints. That I think that the Board of Land Commissioners, maybe not this Board of Land Commissioners, it's they're all running for offices or not running again. But the next iteration will probably have to deal with it in some regard. Yeah.
So food freedom suddenly became this really popular thing to talk about state level. And I noticed it's not in the interim list of topics, but it's going to be discussed at the Ag Committee on June 12th when I happen to be there for the fence out. What are you hearing about food freedom, and what do you think about
We
that?
know exactly who that's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, there have been enough little bubbling points, flashpoints lately on that issue that no doubt the committee will take it up. Tyler Lindholm is a former legislator who was behind establishing those current food freedom laws, is now in a very powerful position politically with a lot of resources to deploy in the state. His group will perhaps swing some different seats around the state, so he will carry a lot of power into that conversation, and no doubt there are going to be more bills this next year to try and carve out and protect that space.
They love freedom and bill titles too.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we have freedom lattes in Cody now, so. So
There's freedom fries in Alpine,
Yeah, we don't just have freedom bills, we have freedom.
not French fries. I didn't put that together forever. Freedom fries.
Others, yeah.
Like earlier this year, we saw a lot of rainwater or stormwater bubble up.
Gosh, I was trying to get out of here without talking about that. Melting down.
Not here.
So I have knots in my neck still from session on that. That was a line, that was fundamentally a line in the sand for us, because if they start telling us, and this is the exaction conversation that Jeremiah and I have to debrief on, because some of the solutions came up, it was back to a stormwater thing that I was scared about. Them telling us what we can and can't do is massive preemption, and we will put every tool in the, and throw it at them. It wasn't so much about the stormwater. So there was two conflicting statutes, and as much as I talked about it, I still can't, it's so confusing. I have two attorneys on it. I have two lobbyists on it. My whole board is on it. This is my president and I's number one issue. We were at Select Water a couple weeks ago, working on it. So what happened is, not to throw Derek under the bus, but they, City of Laramie, I know, wasn't you, City of Laramie, and City of Cheyenne. So first off, Cody and Evanston and there's one other. Cody and Evanston have had a program for 40 years, 20 to 40 years. I think Evanston's is 40 years old and Cody's is at least a decade old. And it's a $5 fee on their bill for the stormwater maintenance on their utility bill. It's been no big deal. Now, they're facing some issues for infrastructure investment and whether or not the question remains in like what goes through the ballot, what doesn't go into the ballot. For capital construction, yes, that's what we're clarifying. And then there's some nuances of financing of what goes to the ballot and what doesn't, but fees we don't want going to the ballot. Just like we don't think every mill levy should be for rec mills should be voted on. Because that takes away the local authority. So we are cleaning that up because we know that there's a massive need to mitigate stormwater. And we're working with the sponsor that we killed his bill, which is Senator Gary Crum. And it was just like the fast track permitting with Lee Filer. As soon as we killed it, I said, okay, we're here to fix this. Like, let's get on the same page so we can pass it together. And Senator Crum, who should be a massive advocate of ours, it was not fun fighting him because, Frank Crum like had a massive goal this year for the Denver Broncos. And I was like, I want to be on your team, So, I mean, he's just a lovable, awesome dude. So he's back on our team. We're on a working group to work through this. And Jackson has EPA issues because of Flat Creek and the runoff. Like they have totally different issues as always, but specifically on stormwater. Cody and Evanston, we don't want to, and the legislature doesn't want to hurt what they're already doing, and there's no problem there. It was Laramie and Cheyenne when they came up with this calculation. I'm talking in circles here, but when they came up with a calculation, it was just like a little salvage yard that got an $800 bill for stormwater. I would lose my mind too. So figuring out how that fee is structured and a statute that supports that and allows us the autonomy to do that is where that devil is in the detail. So we're almost there, I think. And we've got a really intense working group working through it with a lot of really smart people. And we're hoping to deliver that concept at the beginning of August at Select Water. And that committee actually is really awesome and really great people, really great minds on that committee, chaired by Martha Lawley from Moreland and Brad Boner from Douglas as the senator. And so I think if we get there, we'll get it fixed and then everybody can move on from that. But that's like where this exaction thing, even though it's just a one county, one town issue right now, we don't want that to impact everybody else. So keep planning for stormwater. Just if you're not deploying it yet, just give us a little bit more time. And by the way, in Cheyenne and Laramie, no money was exchanged, and those that had the big fees, everything got refunded. And they both rescinded their programs immediately because they heard their locals, and that's why local government works so great because they meet regularly and they were able to take care of it right away. So.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna take about a 15-minute break and then we will have our planning commissioner training.
Well, you need to train this. Yeah. Yeah. He's sorry. Yeah. 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 Gosh. I'm getting very much now. But I spoke with the guy. I don't. Yeah. Are you ready? You know, during that time. That's right. I think I'm talking about. Are you ready? How are you? Good. How was your trip last night? Yeah. Yeah, but like. I heard about. Yeah. Ah.
They're curious. I believe in for like 5 years.
Oh, I know, yeah, and I worked for a local engineer. Gotcha. Oh, close that, like. And, questions. The whole thing, I like it, or, yeah, you actually like when I left the town, but we paid for she like. Yeah, from they found it. You know, we were like, oh. That's hilarious. The mayor loves him. Yeah. He pulled in on some. Yeah. I was thinking about the permitting. Yes. Personally, I feel like. The permitting software. Yeah, no, there's somebody in. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, did you know I actually wear mine when it's really. Still use from bubble. Yeah, I mean, have to go ahead and they have program.
I did, yeah, I should have just had a tray.
I know.
I thought about
Catch up on the box.
I thought about it yesterday, gave you a call, and then I completely faced it, and I'm like, 7:85 last night, I was like, oh, I should. Yeah, Caitlin's coming over too, we've all got different side jokes, so everyone guys.
I agree, and I was very.
Andrew, this is like Christmas season on our Friday question. Andrew's a
Like,
friend.
like, okay, how much, and there are people that. Like, I don't.
Your water.
Goes into our place. So, we just have a lot of excited there. We've been trying it. I did too.
Like, I gotta go, I really like, food, something for food, but I figured.
You warned me, so. I guess that's it. Yeah, I talked to him.
Yeah.
Cause it seems like. So.
Do I have an egg?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, I don't know. That's where like, I don't. I had to revise the.
They got some less. Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have a few bucks.
Well, it's basic city works and the other one.
Don't worry, we'll read about every.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. We'd like to do this for open record, so it can be a lot, for the public. That's why, actually, paying it's much smaller, right? I think, yeah. 20, 30. So I had 90 grams down, right? Down so it's not. I don't have it. I know, well. I mean, so, you know what I'm saying, they're not as organized as you guys, right?
Ready to learn?
Yeah.
Oh, this is your stuff.
You know, so it's very simple, very.
Always important.
Yeah.
Very long.
There's five of my neighbors, all five.
Yeah.
But they don't always see it eye to eye. It's all right.
I'll be like, something about. So
Don't regulate short-term rentals, county.
whatever the cities are.
Oh, yeah, they always want to fight with it. I mean, many industries in Wyoming, that's something for you. Like septic dumping, all that stuff. I don't know. I can't take a culture that used to just. Or come and start creating a bunch of people. The hardest thing about short-term rentals is, what's the difference between you dating your daughter and staying at her house? And if she doesn't come, then I now short-term rental. So.
You don't make a point, but
State county. George, I stayed at a basically a community house, I do like eight different people staying in one house. Yeah, he even had like parking lots, like fitted in his driveway. So, I mean, it's like a little mini hotel.
yeah. That's what we know.
For those of us that have lived in cities. In my 45 years, I can tell you since I was 20, and I left mom and dad's house, I didn't know my neighbors. I barely now bought a house behind me, so now I know my neighbor. But all the years when I parked, I never lived on that. Yeah. I don't care. Abstract. But then again, though, I just want to be able to work on cars, sell cars at my house. And that's why people, you know, I don't do it. People have a lot of stuff. I've never been to the guy tried to put me three back water trucks, trailers, and bulldozers. I'm like, it sure is. I'm like, I'm sure you will. Sure. That's Yeah, so that's why we migrated to their match. I mean, that's what we do. So that's something I'm doing. I have from 1987. They're like, well, they haven't been caught here. Well, they don't do it. Like, so one time, got the again, it was more like a forgotten area, right? So we get all. I mean, I got lots of 30 years. I actually for a while. I had a. Right off my lane.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's like, I'm like, why God said you can't do it? Well,
I don't know how you. No good show like this, so it's like all of that.
you get some. Takes a year to get that. Right? Now, I get very little TikTok. I had a very big taste that went all the way to the sports. I had a lady. Yeah, they're like, well, you know, one of the developers, he's our chief surveyor and he runs a lot of projects. He's like, it does no good to approve your decision, can't afford to get things. I'm sat in my office. I feel like not really gonna, you know, gonna get done. I'm like, it's part of.
That's what
Well, I. We gain more people a month. Why not gain a year in Austin? I mean.
Now I've got a building.
Oh, good.
Without fun. What do you found?
And enough, man.
Damn, you know McDonald's. Yeah. For a man from real estate, that's probably the hardest. My best friend told me, like,
Yeah.
hardest thing. Because one, you're and two, no restaurant.
Yeah.
My knowledge. And Salt Lake has. Hours. In August, waiting for those. That was.
Okay, if everybody will take their seats, then we will start our planning commissioner training with Andrew Bowen.
Oh, do we have a? It's not, oh, it's fine, I'll just stand here.
That's a good question. That's a Paul question.
No, that's fine. All right, Andrew Bowen, nice to see you all. I am a board member on YPass. I'm also a senior planner for the town of Jackson. So I tried to make this as fun as possible. Planning commission training and ethics often aren't fun subjects, or they're not hard subjects, they're just kind of dry. So I tried to interject some comedy where I can. So first and foremost, who all is a planning commissioner or on some board like that within your community? So not too many. All right. Well, thank you. It's often can be a stressful job, and depending on your jurisdiction, most of you probably are not getting paid, but you take the heat in the grocery stores and on the streets just like an elected official. So thank you for your service to your communities. It's very important to the planning process. So just a little bit about WildPass. Who are we? We are an organization of professional and layman planners who are involved in planning activities which affect the well-being of Wyoming residents. What we do at WildPass was formed by for the purposes of advocating planning programs to preserve quality of life in Wyoming and facilitate coordination and cooperation between planners, and to provide continuing education opportunities. So hopefully you get some value out of this conversation today. So we've covered this a bit in the last session for legislative issues, but next to the right of liberty, the right of property is the most important individual right guaranteed by the Constitution. So this is important because planning is land use regulation. So we are actively regulating the rights of other individuals. So if property rights are so important, why are there so many rules about how property can be used and developed? So planning commissions and planning departments and municipalities and counties, they do this to provide the orderly development today and into the future, protect shared community and natural resources, balance the interests of landowners, developers, neighbors, agencies, and the public, maintain and improve community quality of life, and address changing community needs such as housing, infrastructure, and economic growth. So as you all know, all the planners in the room, elected officials and planning commissioners, balancing all of these, and they're often conflicting, it can be very difficult. It's a difficult job, both for staff and for you all. So hopefully just feel inspired that you're really doing the community's work. So kind of planning 101, we'll just cover this very quickly. So kind of the foundational principle of regulating land is the right of local communities, both counties and municipalities, to have police power, not your police out on the streets, but the constitutional police power. So that's the authority to regulate land use and development to protect public health, safety, and welfare. So this is done through multiple mechanisms in Wyoming: zoning, subdivision regulation, building and safety codes, nuisance enforcement, and environmental and public health protections. And then your limits on police power. And again, these start in the U.S. Constitution, trickle down through the Wyoming Constitution, and then through your LDRs or LURs, whichever you have in your community. But you only have the authority granted by the state of Wyoming. Must follow constitutional protections, cannot act arbitrarily or unfairly, must respect property rights and takings law, and must support decisions with adopted regulations and standards. So the key principle here is that local governments can regulate land use and development, but they cannot act outside of the authority that's granted by the state of Wyoming. This is different. I've worked in multiple states. Some states have home rule communities that really have a lot of authority in what they can regulate and how they regulate those. But Wyoming is not. We're a individual state, so that means that we can only go as far as the state legislature allows.
So more planning 101. So Wyoming's planning framework for planning commissions specifically operate under authority granted again by the Wyoming statutes and local land development regulations. Some communities, again, your LDRs, some LURs, and then comprehensive plans and adopted policies. So just an important reminder, planning commissions are not elected to make personal preference decisions, and we'll go into this a bit further. They are responsible for applying adopted plans, policies, and regulations in a fair, consistent, and legally defensible manner. So as far as Wyoming goes, what's important for planning commissions and municipalities and counties, planning processes in general, these are your enabling authority. So all of these statutory sections, this is where you all get the authority to make the decisions, how to make those decisions, and seemingly how and why you can make those decisions. So counties are generally covered in Title 18 of the state statutes. I won't go through all of these. Paul in here. I don't know if these, Angela, will these be available somewhere? Do we share? Okay. But the key distinctions here are counties primarily regulate land use in unincorporated areas, as you all know, that are within counties. Cities and towns regulate land use within their municipal boundaries, and municipal zoning authority cannot be contravened by county zoning authority. So, as was covered prior and will be covered, I believe we're having a legislative session at the end of today, and all these QR codes are live. But legislative authority for counties and municipalities can change. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about proposed and exaction changes, changes to stormwater authority. So every year, bills can be introduced that can affect how we make decisions, how you all as planning commissioners make decisions, and what types of decisions you can make. So this QR code will take you to the WyoClear Easier Legislative Review. So that just gives you kind of a brief snapshot of what's going on at the legislature. You can also, on the WyoPass website, you can also, we have a legislative a legislative tab up at the top, so you can see what's going on that would affect planning commission and planning in general within the state of Wyoming. And I am moving fast. I will not take an hour, I'm afraid. So, but we'll leave a lot of time for discussion if need be. So what is a planning commission? Hopefully, if you're a planning commissioner, you know why you're here and what you do. But a planning commission is a group of community members that advises the governing body, such as the Board of County Commissioners, on planning, land use, and community development matters. Planning commissions serve as citizen planners who help shape policies and plans that guide future growth and development. They also provide an important public forum for community input and feedback on proposed projects. And some planning commissions across the state also, I don't know about each different municipality or county, but also serve as the Board of Adjustment. So they're not always just advisory. When acting as a Board of Adjustment, you are the final say, and we'll go a bit into why that's important here in a minute. Any questions so far? All right. So planning commission relationships, it's really important for the planning commission to have a great relationship with their support staff and great working relationships with elected officials. Where there's disjointed relationships, that's where things kind of fall, decisions get made, or planning commissions can spend a lot of time working on a comprehensive planning effort or a text amendment that might not be popular for the elected officials. So it's very important to have good open lines of communications. One thing I would advocate for is, and a lot of communities don't do this, but at least a yearly joint workshop meeting between a planning commission and a council or a board of commissioners, just to set a working plan. If you do have an active planning planning commission, but also just to, again, form those relationships and make sure that your working bodies are working towards the same goals. So, but you're all, the planning commission's relationship with the elected officials is, again, your primary role, unless acting as quasi-judicial board, and we'll go into that word here in a minute, is to advise elected officials and to serve as kind of the first backstop in community planning and decisions that could impact your communities. Commissioners should recognize that final decision-making authority rests with elected officials. I know you all are voluntary boards, and sometimes it does. It kind of stinks a little bit when you go through, long public hearings and you pass up a recommendation of approval or denial, and that decision is overturned by the elected officials. Again, those elected officials were elected to make those decisions, but are leaning on you all to really provide as much analysis and advisory role as possible. But again, maintaining a strong working relationship requires keeping elected officials informed on planning matters and providing clear, well-reasoned recommendations. So your relationship with staff, this one is very important. Planning staff are essential to the land use process and support the effectiveness of the Planning Commission. So staff, we're here to help you do your job and keep you informed on how to make those decisions. And if there are any issues, we are here to identify those so you all can discuss these and vet those up to the elected officials. Staff and the commission should work collaboratively as a team, and the commission provides community perspective while staff provides technical expertise and guidance on regulations and procedures. So we can provide the LDR sections. Hey, this is how it complies. You all can provide more community context. Well, this neighborhood, would be very impacted by this. So you can, we're often out in the community as well, but you all are representing a broad spectrum, hopefully, of your commissions or of your communities. And then staff also administer regulation, prepare plans, reports, and recommendations. So staff roles in the Planning Commission. So commissioners should openly share their perspectives or perceptions of community needs, attitudes, concerns, and priorities with staff. Candor and honesty are essential to building a strong cooperative and working relationship. So these are quite small, but it's your job to ask questions, to be informed. I've put an example here, and I have a few examples of good questions. Not that these questions are what you should be asking, but kind of asking for a level of detail and being invested in this process really helps planning staff kind of identify issues that may come up, and then also help you form your decisions when you go to make a decision at the end of a hearing. So this example, could you go into a bit more detail about traffic impacts? I am worried I cannot make finding number 7 due to proposed impacts. So again, just really diving deeply within a proposal really helps staff and helps that public process vet through the system. So going over roles just a little bit, staff's role explains land use at the counter. We're the people there. We're talking to residents, developers every day, and we're kind of the first line of moving applications through the process. We accept or reject applications, often through a sufficiency process, but overall, if an application is sufficient, each landowner has the right to go through a public process to use their property in the way that's appropriate for the land use regulations they fall under. And then we prepare the staff reports for you all. We handle public notice and other administration and stay current on regulations, court cases, rulings, etc. So this effect on you all is staff's explanation and attitude affect the tone, content, and testimony to the Planning Commission. So staff can help kind of either help or hurt public process. It's very important for us to be completely neutral. As staff, you all can, of course, express your concerns, but again, staying within the bounds of that legislative authority that you all have. Staff ensures applications are complete. We've already gone over that. Staff identifies key issues and applicable criteria that help the Planning Commission make informed decisions and assist the public in understanding testimony. I have this in a later slide, but here's important. So if you've been on a planning commission for a long time or you're new, and you see an issue with the staff report, that's perfectly fine. Staff make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. As a planner, I think most planners appreciate if you give us a call before the meeting. Say, hey, I don't see how you made this finding, or these square footage calculations seem a bit different. Can we go over this? And then kind of handling those issues outside of a public hearing. It supports staff, but it also just makes that public process cleaner. Anything that staff can do to address issues or anything inaccurate with a staff report that you find early, it's always best to communicate those early and often. And if there's not an issue, if you have a big question that's going to require some research for staff, what does this plan from 1987 say for this parcel of land or something like that? Send those requests, give planning staff a call. It really helps for us to get prepared, and then we can address those within the public hearing. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a public hearing and been asked a question that I just can't answer. And it kind of makes planners stumble through the process and then leads planning commissioners to, well, why can't we answer this? And are we ready to make a decision? And then it's again, staff's role to properly notice. This is important for you all because if you make a decision outside of due process, which is the constitutional right, your decisions could be thrown out in court because staff did not follow the correct timeframes and proper noticing requirements. And then staying current helps prevent planning commission errors due to outdated and incomplete information. So when there is new text amendments, of course, they go through you all, but having a kind of a yearly check-in on what changes have we had to the land use regulations? If we have a comp plan update, what does that say? Or if we have a complete streets program that the town just adopted, trying to stay up to date on those. I understand it's an unpaid job, and it takes time. But staff are here to help and help you all understand all of these different puzzle pieces that kind of make all of this community planning effort work. So what can I do to be a better planning commissioner? Again, ask questions. Staff, how does this proposal align with comprehensive plan? Could you provide clarification on policy 51D? That means nothing. That's just an arbitrary section of code or of the comp plan. But, really invest yourselves in the decision-making process. I have a funny graphic, but sometimes whether staff are presenting or the public are presenting, sometimes planning commissions lose focus. We've got one planning commissioner. I don't know what she's doing. These are all AI generated, so these aren't real people. But somebody checking their phone. What that says to staff is, okay, either this planning commissioner is divesting from the conversation, or whoa, are they talking? Are messages being sent in front of the dais that I don't know about? Then often these meetings are late at night and it's tiring. You've already put in a whole day's work and now you're coming, and sometimes there's a long line of public comment that you're listening to. And by the fifth person saying the same thing, seemingly as everybody else in front, but keeping that engagement, keeping that eye contact and an occasional head nod really goes a long way, both for staff, but more so for the public, to make sure that this process, you are representing the community. And then not necessarily in the community I work in now, but I have been in public hearings where there's kind of bickering between planning commissioners. That's fine if you bicker, but not bickering. When you're discussing a project, it is completely fine for one commissioner to say, I don't agree with this planning commissioner, and then you get staff to try to provide some input on if there is an issue with the application to try to figure out where this problem is. But again, know the proposal. Most important is, depending on your community, sometimes these agendas are really long, and staff understand that there's a lot of work in getting ready outside of everything else that everybody has going on in their lives. But trying to familiarize yourself with the proposal and also kind of the applicable regulatory framework that is covering that proposal. And then again, stay engaged with staff, check in before a meeting if you have questions. Keep comments relevant. A lot of the discussions that we have in the planning process, they can take huge tangents, and that's fine if that's relevant. But sometimes staff, planning commissioners, and the public, we all know we can be worried about one thing, but we're actually worried about something that we're looking at way out there. So I'm trying to reel in these comments to really just discuss what we're here to discuss right now. Be consistent. If you didn't have a problem with parking along this street for a last development plan, try to keep that in back of mind when the property just next door has the same application. And, we're not setting precedent with each decision that we make as planning commissioners, but try to keep that consistent. If I had this issue in the past, I should at least think why I don't have this issue in the future. Again, ask questions and listen to the public. So the role of the chair. So this is really important for staff, really important for public hearings. How many of you are chairs? Can we have any chairs? Oh, sweet. All right. So your role is really important, both to your community and the commission that you are chair of. So chair plays a critical role in ensuring planning commission meetings are organized, fair, efficient, and productive. The chair guides the meeting, explains procedures, manages public comment, keeps discussions focused and respectful, and helps ensure the commission follows applicable laws and processes. Strong chair helps maintain order, encourages participation, and supports clear, legally defensive decision-making. I think one of the hardest chair responsibilities is sometimes keeping meetings orderly. So, if I'm here, I'm upset about this proposal, and I turn around and I stop addressing you all and I start addressing my neighbors, it's really up to the chair to be like, hey, you're here to speak with us. You're not here to rally the troops behind you. You don't have to say it that way, but they're here to discuss this with you all. So when carrying out planning commission duties, decisions are generally fall into two categories. So again, unless your planning commission is also acting as a board of adjustment, we'll go into this. So you fall into kind of two subgroups. You have quasi-judicial. So these commissioners act like judges, applying existing regulations to a specific property or application. So examples here are pretty narrow. So use permits, subdivisions, variances, and appeals. So this is when you are having a public hearing and people are coming to provide testimony about a very distinctive piece of property that is only going to affect one property owner or a group of property owners. We'll go into quasi-judicial process here in a minute. But those are where you have your public hearings. And legislative, quasi-legislative, so commissioners act like lawmakers, creating or changing policies and regulations to apply more broadly. So examples, these are your comprehensive plan amendments, rezones, and land development regulation text amendments. Again, each LUR and LDR sometimes can treat these a bit different from county to county or municipality to municipality, but overall, these are kind of your two buckets of decision-making processes. So a bit more about quasi-judicial procedures and public hearings. So this is where things can turn to litigation if you don't follow the rules and due process. So quasi-judicial decisions require a planning commission to make formal findings. So a good example are the conditional use permits that you all have an advisory role in passing up to the town council. You'll have a public hearing. And so you have to consider the required factors. These are findings of facts normally within your LDRs or LURs. And you have to base your decision on evidence applicable to the regulations at hand. So just bringing in, I think there might be a traffic impact. If there's not really something stating that there's going to be a traffic impact and you do not have a transportation professional in front of you telling that there's going to be a traffic impact, you need to be very clear in your findings why you think that is, because there could be some standing issue there and taking testimony that might not be in front of you. And then findings explained by the commission made, findings explaining why the commission made its decision. So some commissions do this where they go through each finding of fact at every meeting. I would encourage you during these processes, especially the planning commission, to go through each finding and state either if you agree with staff, if that's how your staff's role is, or go through each finding and say why or why not you can't make those findings, because those are very important for the record. So quasi judicial matters also require due process. So this is where your proper public notice comes into play. Again, not your all's job, but important to understand. And an opportunity for the public and applicant to be heard. So this is the public hearing piece of your all's meeting. And then an unbiased and decision. You are supposed to be an unbiased decision maker. When in doubt about kind of your role and if the proper process has been followed or is being followed, just double check with your staff or your town or county attorney before you kind of go somewhere that you don't want to be. So navigating public hearings, I'm sure you all have, do you all have kind of a public hearing agenda that you all follow? They all differ a bit, but one, chair explains procedures and expectations. This is where the chair says, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Please keep everything cordial. We understand there are a lot of you here tonight to talk about this. You have 3 minutes. If someone in front of you has said something and you're just going to repeat that, please don't. It's not going to sway the decision having heard the same comment 20 times. So that's the chair's role. And then provide clear direction to the audience. Again, stating that you're here to provide testimony to us, not the crowd, and please do not do so. Stay on agenda, hear staff presentation, ask questions. Always speak through the chair. Staff should be speaking through the chair. The applicant should be speaking through the chair. Everyone should speak through the chair. Hear the applicant presentation. Again, they're speaking through the chair. Establish time limits for comments. Open the hearing. Use staff for clarification and guidance. Maintain control of the meeting. Be respectful to everyone. And then once public comment is closed, this is vital for the chair, public comment should be closed. Once that testimony period is over, everything that happens, or if someone stands up and says something, it's not testimony anymore, and it should be treated as such. Your all's decisions should be based on staff's analysis, the applicant, and the public comment that you heard during the public comment period, not anything that happens before or after. And then once public comment, and then deliberate and decide. So after a decision is made, or before a decision is made, again, you all know this, a motion is a proposal by a commissioner to initiate action, discussion, or a final decision on an item. Process in general, the chair calls for a motion, a commissioner brings a motion and a different chair seconds that motion. And then after that, that's when you all discuss the motion on the floor. Sorry, go ahead.
I've got a question about your prior slide. You said speaking through the chair. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So if I staff, for example, if I get asked a question, you respond to the chair and then you respond to the commissioner that asked you that question. Inversely, and it depends on the formality of your commission, but it should be the chair's job to ensure that the body up front is working together, and that if you have one commissioner that is asking several questions, it can detract from everyone else. So a lot of boards, a commissioner will say, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff, and everything kind of funnels through that one piece just to keep, again, it's helpful for administrative staff that are taking the minutes, but it also just provides a layer of control. And just like from public perspective, should be, again, everything kind of funnels into the chair and out to commission, if that makes sense. Okay. So we went on, so after a motion is made and seconded, then it's your all's responsibility to discuss the motion. And again, if there's any friendly amendments or changes, that's kind of where those actions take place. And then once that discussion has been had, then the chair will call for a vote. It's very important, again, that any amendments that are made occur after that vote. And if there is an amendment that can't be agreed upon, again, it can't be made under that first motion and second. So keeping that record clean is very important for planning commissioners and staff, just to be able to follow if there are conditions or anything like that. And if you do have conditions, ensure that they make them in the motion. Oftentimes, there's a lot of discussion on potential conditions or recommended conditions, but they never make them into the motion. So at that point, if they're not in the motion, they're not in the motion. So whoever has applied for this or is going through this process, if a lot of discussion was had about traffic impacts and that this, road frontage should be this instead of this, if it didn't make it into the motion, it's going to be very difficult for staff or the town to be able to apply those unconditioned conditions. So keep motions clean, keep conditions very clean. Go ahead.
So if in that situation, there's a motion been called, and then there's a second, and there's a lot of discussion, and you have come up with amendments, then should a whole new motion then be made, or do you have to?
No, you can amend a motion on the floor. But if it's, and any of the planners in the room can jump in if they want. If it's a very different motion and it's very different and it's not truly a friendly amendment to that emotion or to that motion, or you're adding conditions, then you need to vote on that motion if it fails and then bring that new motion to the floor. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be very clean. We've lost court cases over bad decisions, right? So, your resolution, your action on the decision, you have to be very clear. And as a P&Z commission, your recommendations are advisory. It's not quite as serious as a board of county commissioners, but you're advising the board, right? Or your town council or whoever it is that you're working for. And your recommendations often carry through to become their decision. So if yours is clear and you give good direction, then they can potentially follow through and use that as their finding as well. So it's just really important that whatever you decide is the reason for your recommendation to approve or deny, it's very clear what those reasons are. And another thing that kind of gets stepped on sometimes, this just happened with our board, if you're going to deny something, that is even more important to be clear as to why you're denying, because if you only give one reason for denial, and maybe you only have one, but then it gets appealed, to a higher court, and that court overturns it. Well, if you only had one reason for denial, you don't get to possibly win on those other reasons for denial. So just being super extra clear why we're approving or why we're denying, because if it's not clear, you can lose just because you lack the clarity.
So you're saying in the motion, you should be including those reasons for approval?
That's the point of the motion. Yep, is you're providing your evidence, your explanation as to why you're recommending approval, like why something met the rule, why it should be approved, or why it didn't make the cut. And you have to be very clear. And obviously, you want to lean on your rule, right? If they didn't meet a certain requirement in the rule, that's very easy then, right? Look, the rule says you have to have this, you don't have it, there's a reason for denial. But if you don't do that, if you don't specify, the court isn't necessarily just going to go ahead and figure it out themselves. So it has to be very clear. And we're very fortunate in Park County. We have a pretty formal planning and zoning commission. They do a pretty darn good job, talking about things and trying to make information clear. But when you have new board members, and that could be on your planning commission or your board of county commissioners or your town council, whoever it is, new members don't always have this experience with those formalities. And so you may need to guide your other members, because they don't know. Like they'll make a motion, you may have to guide them on that motion. Like, hey, we have to be more clear. We have to cite specifically why we're denying. And don't be afraid to give that guidance because you want it to be solid at the end.
Yes, so for the town of Jackson, we had a recent denial and the motion was in the planning commission, it was I recommend denial based on the inability to make findings 1 and 3. So being very clear of why you're denying those and having those covered within the record. So again, we've already gone over findings, but these are statements of the evidence and reasoning used by the commission to reach its decision. Findings must be supported by facts and typically include a description of the request, relevant facts, the basis of approval or denial, and any conditions of approval. And then the record is the record that we all know. The record is a collection of evidence presented during proceedings and serves as the foundation of the commission's decision. A complete record and clear findings help support decisions and protect against legal challenges. And the record typically includes meeting minutes, staff reports, public testimony, exhibits, and the final decision letter. So if that decision were appealed to a higher court, that record is what will be used to see if there was any reason why that decision should be overturned or modified or brought back to that decision-making body. I'll go over these very briefly. You all know what your local regulations. These are your land use regulations or land development regulations. And these are kind of the rule book for your local community. They vary from place to place. They're different. Again, the overall framework of almost all of our, whether you're in a county or a municipality, again, is framed by what we can do as stated by the state legislature and state statutes. These regulations implement, hopefully, the community's comprehensive plan and establish standards for zoning, subdivision, sign, building, placement, signage, parking, landscape, and environmental protection. Hopefully, if staff is bringing an application to you, it is to the point where it is consistent with the LDRs. There should not be these huge gaping holes if you have a setback issue. Hopefully that has been raised prior by staff and it's being worked out by the applicant. I won't go through all these. You all look, again, depending on your community, you would look at a lot of different use permits. So just familiarizing yourself with kind of the general framework of what these apply to, what they regulate, their general processes to go through your town or county's process. Those are all important. So just having, you don't have to be an expert in all of these, but the ones that do come in front of you, knowing how each one of these is handled and kind of what lane you need to be acting in when looking at these is very important. Subdivision, won't go over. This is just the subdivision of land. Again, state statutes tell us how and kind of generally the framework of how we can regulate subdivision, both within municipalities and counties. Growth management, some communities don't have growth management plans, some do in Wyoming, but growth management in Wyoming helps communities guide development while balancing property rights, infrastructure and housing needs, economic growth, community character, and natural resources. Planning commissioners support this process through comprehensive planning, land use regulation, and other actions. Save some time for comment. So a big one for us is comprehensive plans. This should be a guiding document in how you all are looking and making decisions. So comprehensive plan or comp plan is a long-range policy document that guides how a community grows and develops over time. It is a roadmap or in Wyoming it is prepared, and in Wyoming it's seemingly prepared by and ran through a planning commission and adopted by the governing body to promote the public health, safety, general welfare. So in Wyoming, the comp plan is strictly advisory. It's not regulatory, but it provides foundation for zoning, subdivision regulations, capital investments, and land use decisions. So I won't reiterate because I just copied these or covered these, but again, it's the foundation for zoning. Any rezoning request that comes in front of you, you should be balancing with your future land use map or your comprehensive plan, and making those decisions to ensure that your potential growth or what decisions you're making are both consistent with the comprehensive plan. But the comprehensive plan is important also for developers, property owners, and private sector because it provides predictability in kind of a town's planning process. And then again, it covers all of what is covered. That was a redundant sentence. So why the comprehensive plan matters? Again, balancing decisions with the comprehensive plan ensures decisions are consistent, thoughtful, defensible, and transparent. Note, while the comprehensive plan does not approve or deny projects on its own, it helps explain why certain decisions are made. So if someone, again, asks for a substantial upzone on a piece of property that was never pitted for that type of development, it's very easy for a planning commission to say, hey, we're not going to recommend approval of this. This is not part of the town's growth plan whatsoever. All right, so a little bit about ethics. We won't do a full ethics training. I would encourage everyone, either if you're a town manager or planner, at least once a year, to go through ethics training with your planning commissioners. Some states it's required, some it's not. But commissioners represent the entire jurisdiction, not individual interests. Decisions should advance public health, safety, and general welfare, and they should avoid favoritism or special treatment. I don't have to tell you all these things, but serves as a good reminder that you're here not to just serve yourself or your neighborhood, but the cap that you're wearing is representing the community as a whole. Impartiality and due process are very important in the decisions you all make. You need to keep an open mind until all testimony and evidence is heard, and you must base your decisions on conference plan, adopt regulations, and evidence in the record. Personal opinions, and community pressure should not replace adopted standards or procedures. So, these three, and we covered takings. Hopefully, we're not having large takings issues at the planning commission level. If you have any questions about what a takings is, that's just you're taking someone's right away to reasonably use their property, and those, if they happen, they get taken to court. But I didn't cover it within this presentation just because that doesn't really happen that often at the planning commission level. But these three certainly do, and are certainly important for you all to understand the concepts of. So recuse or not to recuse, and conflict of interest. So these happen. Again, you all are parts of neighborhood organizations. You go to church, play softball, whatever you do, you're out in the community. So a planning commissioner should recuse themselves when a real or perceived conflict of interest could compromise their ability to act impartially on behalf of the public. So again, these are quite small, but and we're often small towns. So I did the site survey for this application. Obviously, if you have worked on the application in front of you, that is automatic grounds for recusal. Even if you're done with the project and you provided that service, you're still invested in this permit going through the system and being approved. Ex parte communication. This one is very hard, especially with our kind of modern day communication styles. But ex parte communication is an off the record communication about a pending application or quasi judicial matter between a planning commissioner and an interested party outside of public hearing and without notice to other parties. So that's if you have a conditional use permit, you should not be having discussions, whether it's on a neighborhood forum or it's, at your kid's baseball game. If an applicant or even a concerned neighbor starts to talk to you about a decision that is coming to the planning commission, it is your responsibility to shut that down. It helps for planning commissioners and for the planners in the room. If you do have a permit coming through the system, letting your planning commissioners know and your elected officials know hey, we're gonna have this decision it's following the judicial process. Just keep this on note to not talk about a neighbor or get on Facebook and start reading things and, just stay away as best you can. Keep yourself kind of in a judicial bubble, if you will. Because if I'm an applicant and I find that you have been discussing outside of the meeting why you might not approve this or recommend not approving, you're now stepping on my constitutional right of due process because those conversations happened outside of a public hearing. And I could potentially litigate. So this is very difficult sometimes, and you don't know where that line is, but it's just easiest to put yourself in a bubble. Go ahead.
So if I'm a commissioner and I'm trying to educate myself on a certain topic, and I'm seeking out, say, like a local engineer who's not a part of the project and asking questions, do you think that falls in that? And would it be better for me to invite that engineer to like the public hearing as opposed to educating myself outside of the planning commission meeting? Or...
Yeah, you would be doing that. You would be gathering testimony outside of the public hearing. So that certainly would be ex parte communication. A big one that we see all the time is, hey, I've got this development plan that's coming. Would you like to do a site visit, before the meeting so I can tell you kind of our program, what we're going to do? That is not allowed and is against someone's constitutional right of accessing that or providing testimony or hearing the same testimony that you heard within a public hearing.
What you might do is, for example, if they offer a site visit, you might say, it sounds like a great idea, as long as the whole commission can be there and we can advertise it. The public, here's the name of the staff, give them a call, they can arrange something. If you're, on your first question, if you're talking about getting educated about a general topic, as opposed to a specific property, that's a different story. If you say, I just want to learn more about water rights or water quality or zoning issues, that's a different story. If the question is, I want to learn about this specific property, because this is going to come to us in the future, that's I think where you want to determine, are we making a decision about this one person's property, or are we making general education and laws that apply to everybody?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I took it as this was a conversation about that property. But if it's just you, being curious about bicycle lanes, you can talk to whoever you want. Any other questions about ex parte communication? But again, when in doubt, just ask staff or perhaps not staff, but ask your town attorney or county attorney. So with all that said, if you do have a conflict of interest or you have had ex parte communication, it's not an automatic recusal, but you need to disclose in the public meeting before the public hearing starts. Say, hey, I spoke with Jerry about this. We didn't have a discussion that's going to, sway my conversation. I didn't get any more information that anybody else is going to hear in the room. So I don't need to recuse myself. Or, hey, this is my aunt. She's got a conditional use permit for this daycare, but, that is not going to affect my decision. Disclosing is very important, especially to keep those perceived issues. The last thing you want, again, we're all people out in the community. We don't want somebody out there like, oh, he made this decision just because it was his brother-in-law or something like that. So disclosure is an opportunity for you to provide the community your justification for being able to vote on a motion. So common ethical pitfalls, there are several, but everyone knows how I feel about this project. So coming into a public hearing and already having an opinion, it's very difficult. It's very difficult not to do that. But you all need to have an open mind. And if it meets the findings, it meets the findings. These decisions should not be made based on your personal opinion. These are someone's land rights that we're protecting, and we're also protecting the neighbors. But if staff and the commission makes findings, you need to stay within kind of that decision framework. Informal conversations with the applicant, again, we've already covered this, or neighbors. Staff can help by giving proper internal notice for upcoming hearings. Voting on a matter involving a spouse, client, or nearby property without a recusal or disclosure. Again, you don't always have to recuse yourself, but if there is any possibility of a community member being able to say, "Hey, I don't think you should make that decision," having that disclosure up front really helps to provide a better aesthetic for your decision. And then using personal expertise instead of the record of evidence. Just because you were a traffic engineer in some other state and you think it's going to have an issue with this application, if there's not been testimony showing that there is going to be an issue, it's really not your place to bring that. You're not acting as a testimony provider. You are analyzing the testimony that's been brought in front of you. Did you have a question about? Okay. Did you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about disclosure, right?
Yeah.
So if you have the hearing and you disclose that this is a relative of mine, but it shouldn't have any basis on my decision. What if the public hearing says, well, then you should recuse yourself from being voting on this matter?
It's up to you as commissioner. I mean, there are things that you have to recuse yourself from. You know, if you're going to have a financial gain.
Disclose that you're aware that you're a relative or you discussed this prior, that you're clear free. I mean, what if the applicant said, well, then you shouldn't even be voting on this if you've had that conversation?
An applicant can't tell you that you can't vote.
You should, at that point, I would suggest talking to the county attorney.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you, I mean, a relative, I would certainly recuse myself.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's gonna look really,
Yeah.
I kind of look at it like,
yeah, it
what
shouldn't
does
even
it
be,
look like the rest of the world?
Yeah.
it shouldn't even be brought to the table, you know?
Yeah.
It should have happened prior.
But it's harder, you know, especially in some of the small communities we live in. You know, there are a lot of relatives sometimes, or there's a lot of friends, or, you know, there's not many neighborhoods that aren't having a direct effect on others. So yeah, I would just say, if you need to, pause and ask your town attorney or staff or your county attorney, hey, do I need to recuse myself? And when in doubt, you know, just do it, you know, unless it's going to cause a voting issue and you really don't need to. That makes sense.
Your bylaws also for your commission may address some of this. Sometimes they have rules for when to recuse, reasons or things like that, or they may have a way to deliberate that. So that's something too.
Yeah, so based on that conversation, there are 4 questions. These aren't too difficult. So number 1, the former business partner, Jerry. It's always Jerry. I just chose one name. Jerry, the applicant. Sorry if there's any Jerrys in the room. Jerry, the applicant, was your business partner 5 years ago. You no longer work together, but you still occasionally socialize and own a small piece of equipment together. What should you do? Vote normally, disclose only, recuse, let the chair decide privately. Number 2, the site visit problem. Before the hearing, Jerry personally walks you around the property and explains why staff's analysis is incorrect. No staff or other commissioners are present. What should you do next? The neighborhood group chat. You are in a neighborhood text group. Jerry posts updates about his pending application and several neighbors debate the project. You never respond, but you read all of the messages. Number 4, the campaign supporter. This isn't really applicable to you all. Sorry, these were questions from another slide where there were elected officials. But if you ever do get elected, Jerry donated to your recent local campaign and publicly endorsed you online. His application is now before the commission. So, what do you all think? Or I'll just bring them up because we're about out of time. And some of these are wishy-washy, you know, but number 1, recusal may be appropriate if you have shared property. Again, you know, ask your town attorney if this is going to be an issue. It depends on if his benefit is going to benefit you somehow. Just because if you share a tractor, I don't think you should probably recuse yourself. But if it's a plotter and you are a land surveyor and he's going to be able to buy a new plotter and you're going to get all this new work because of this proposal, you know, just think about these things. But normally I would say you're probably okay. But you might just have a disclosure. You should have a disclosure. The site visit problem, this one's obvious. If you've gone and spoken with Jerry and he's already criticized staff, he's trying to sway you outside of a testimony period or public hearing, you should recuse yourself, most likely. But depending on the extent of the discussion and whether impartiality could reasonably be questioned, you may just have to disclose. But just for, again, public aesthetics, I would say, unless it's going to cause an issue, again, you can always continue a hearing if you're not going to have the votes. But I would say it's best to recuse yourself if you've gone on a private site visit with someone. The neighborhood group chat, you're in a neighborhood. Oh, I've already read this one. So this is ex parte communication. I would encourage you, if you're on a neighborhood group chat, do not go through and read those comments. Just stay out of it, because that's, again, testimony off of a public record. And if I am someone, I could call into question, well, you've heard all of this, so your mind is already going to be influenced, or your decision is going to be influenced, or you may have already made a decision before you come. If you've commented, it's obvious you need to recuse yourself. You've already started making the decision before the public hearing. And then the campaign supporter, again, it depends on if you can reasonably and in public confidence say this isn't going to have an effect. But if someone has publicly, endorsed your campaign, given you money, and then you get elected and 3 months later they have a large development proposal come in, again, you have to look at your internal ethics, but how it's going to look towards the community. All right, any questions and discussion? Go ahead.
Provide a point of clarification for everyone, both municipal and county. You cannot require a land use or proposal to be consistent with a land use plan. That is illegal by statute, 151602 and 185201. What should be true is that your land use plan provision should have been adopted as part of your zoning. So if something's important in your land use plan or your comprehensive plan, you should have adopted rules that align with your land use plan or comprehensive plan. You cannot say to someone, I'm going to use the land use plan as my reason to recommend denial of this particular thing. That is illegal. That is a law that came into play not too long ago. But I just want to be clear for both municipalities and counties that is the way that is. If you have a planning and zoning commission member or members who start to throw around the word takings, that's a very legal big thing. That's a very big term. It means something very specific. I would strongly encourage you to pull aside that member or talk with your board, your town council, your mayor, whoever, to maybe coach that individual that, they cannot be making statements about something like that. Takings is something that a lot of people like to just use, and you're taking my rights, but that's not what takings are. Takings are very specific. They're very severe. You can't meet a taking unless you're doing something very, very significant. So I would just caution a PMZ member from ever trying to use takings as your reason for denying something or approving something for that matter, because someone's complaining otherwise. Always consult with the attorney or the legal party that you have available to you to help you with guidance on that particular topic. It is a very famous thing for people to walk in the room and say it's a taking, and they have no idea what that means constitutionally. So just a word of caution there. It's a famous thing right now. People like to walk in, even attorneys will walk in and they'll tell you this is a taking. They need to go back to law school, because you have to be doing something very significant to affect the taking as a governing body. It would be pretty obvious if you were.
Just kind of circle back on your first comment about the land use plan. So we have in our comp plan have a future land use map, where we're going towards, but some of the land is not officially annexed in the town. Recently we had the county ask us about a zone change right outside of our town limit. And we said, in the future, this should be potentially residential, so we maybe don't agree with the zone change. And again, it was their decision and we gave a recommendation, but could technically, since it's not officially on the zoning map, would that not have been?
So definitely consult with your attorney, all right, I was gonna caveat that, however, if you may have a rule in place that talks about what we're gonna do if something's proposed right outside of our boundary. State law gives a little bit of flexibility for cities to comment on developments near their boundaries. It's limited, right? Now, a county can't fully ignore you, right? As much as some of them would like to. The law used to say that the county would potentially have, or the city would have to approve what's going on outside their boundary, but that's not the case anymore. So you just need to make sure that you're falling within statutory guidelines for what you have allowance to even talk about outside of your boundary, extraterritorial jurisdiction. Or if you don't have an MOU or policy in place where you have shared a rule with the county or the city, vice versa. Just be very careful. If it's not in your rule, how you are to handle those things, and if it's not legally allowed under statute, you can't talk about it. Like you can't, oh, well, our land use plan said, no, if it's not in your rule, you don't have some kind of rule or agreement or something that addresses that specific thing, you may be out of luck.
And that was was that a comment for a rezone within the county, not within the municipality?
Yeah, I think the way it says, and I know it says in our comp plan, I don't know if it says it in the town ordinances, but like anything that's within a mile.
Oh, yeah.
Like they speak our.
Oh, sure.
So statute does.
But I think in the comp plan, I haven't actually looked and seen if it's like technically in the ordinances, and maybe it was just a friendly thing. But it just made me think, because it was future land use and not actual current
Sure.
zoning. To your point of, is it then a moot point if it's not actual zoning? If we as commission were making choices on a future land use map. And it's not.
Yeah, and again, just make sure that your rule, okay, is legal and that your attorney feels that you've addressed, but if you're concerned that your rule doesn't give you guidance in that particular area, I would have that conversation with them and then see what state statute may allow. You know, because even if it's not your rule, if statute allows for it, you still may have an opportunity to weigh in, but just be careful to refer to your comp plan as your reason. You know, or I mean, when you're doing a zoning map amendment, those are a little different, you know, because zoning is obviously based on your comp plan too, but like, I would just defer to legal as to like what power you may have to use that reference. You know, you can comment all you want. You would say, oh, hey, look, you're in a future land use area, this is what we're gonna annex, and here's what our thoughts are on that, just to let them know. And, you know, they could potentially use that to help with their reasoning, but just be really careful. That's not even your decision, right? It's just a recommendation at that point to the county, but yeah, just always be careful with that land use plan statute.
I have a question about potential future benefits. Say I was at a planning commission in another state last year, and the chair of the commission is a realtor, and they were ruling on development of approval of several hundred new homes. And the realtor potentially in a small town would be potentially benefiting from commissions on sales of those properties. Is that a reason to refuse, and what kind of potential benefit is important?
Yeah, it's just like a court of law. Someone can't get charged with a crime for the potential of doing a crime.
Okay.
So just because it's a small town, they have to have a direct and, you know, directly foreseeable benefit. You know, I think we start going down a dangerous road if we're like, oh, you know, everybody could possibly have to recuse themselves for some potential benefit of a project.
Good question, just maybe more of a poll, but our P&Z commission does not have bylaws. And I mean, most do, right? I mean, would everyone agree that there should be? I guess.
Yes.
Because what I'm getting back is, you know, there are some of our attorney is, you know, you could, there's benefits to and benefits against, so. I just want to make sure, I mean, I feel pretty strongly that we should, but.
I'll put my opinion out there. I think so, yes. But that's just me. I don't know.
I'll second.
Okay.
Bylaws far out.
Well, I haven't actually heard what what the drawbacks are to having that, and I wasn't sure how I was gonna do.
But I think we're out of time. But if you have any questions, you can ask me. There are plenty of other planners also in the room. I'm just the one that signed up. I'm definitely not the professional. But if you do have any questions, I would encourage you to speak with your staff because each of our situations are different. But thank you.
And I would also suggest if you think of any questions, you can ask them in the city county breakout groups. Those would be great discussions to have there too. Our next presenter will be Josh Olhava, and it's how to write an RFP. And we'll just have a couple minute break because Paul's got to set up his presentation.
Break.
Stop hard thing. Yeah. Keep that up. Is the camera actually on too? It was on my USB. Yeah. There. Slide to do that. There it goes. Okay, it's all up.
Right, I know.
Let's see if it does it in the mode. Sweet too. All right, good luck.
All right, it's on. Trying to make sure I'm in the camera too. I guess it's a little low for me. To do that. There we go. All right, well, good morning still, everyone. So Paul's gonna run and grab some food. And so since we're kind of offset on time here, if it hits about that noon hour and we're at a good kind of pause point, we might cycle, get food and continue our discussion if that works for everyone. So, yeah, well, welcome. Thanks for the attention. That was like really quick. I didn't have to do any, my wife's a teacher tricks and things like that with my hands. But anyway, so how to write an RFQ. A lot of you know how to. So hopefully some of this information is an overview, but also creates some discussion and kind of those aha moments. So why are we here? Well, as a consultant who used to work in the public sector too, a lot of times there's this kind of pointing fingers back and forth at each other, like, why didn't you submit what we were looking for? Why didn't you ask what you were looking for? Things like that. So in the immortal words of Jerry Maguire, help me help you. Let's find a way to kind of work together and collaborate and come up with some cool ideas here. So who are we? Unfortunately, my partner in crime, TJ, there on the far right, I guess for you all, was unable to come up for today. But I am Josh Olhava. I am the Director of Planning and Economic Development at Ayers Associates. Been with the firm for 5 years here in June. Prior to that, I worked for over a decade in the public sector. So as a planner, principal planner, senior planner, all the above. TJ, he is the principal and owner of Community Planning Strategies. So both of us about over 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, we started presenting on professional development topics at conferences, just ways to help us as planners think differently. And as officials and professionals, like how can we evolve and continue to push our profession, our communities, and what we do. So I think it was 9 years ago that someone in one of our sessions said we should brand ourselves. And so you can see the little logo there in the middle. It's small intentionally because that's not the emphasis here, but came up with big, beautifully bearded planners, which works pretty good. So since the both of us are big guys and also have beards. So appreciate your time here. And just so you all know, I'm also the president of the American Planning Association Colorado chapter. So Ayers, we have a Cheyenne office. I work out of that office sometimes, but I also work out of my home a lot of times in Greeley, Colorado. So I would say probably 60% of my time is spent on Wyoming projects and in the state of Wyoming, just because of all the great things that are going on here in the state and the number of relationships and communities we've been a part of, which I can assume about a third of the people in this room I know. So what's nice is if you don't speak up, I can pick on you because I know your name. So that's probably the best part about knowing some people in the audience. So quick show of hands, just so I know who we're kind of working with in the room. How many of you are planners, zoning administrators, kind of the planning staff side of things? Okay. How many of you are officials, planning commissioners, board, county commissioners, etc.? How many of you are engineers? Okay, a couple. How many of you are attorneys? None. We can pick on the attorneys. How many of you are in the procurement office? None. Okay, so attorneys, procurement offices, those are who we can pick on in this session. We got our ground rules. So quick, just, I know you all can raise your hand now and you're all engaged. So a couple of you just curious, what are you hoping to learn or would you like to learn out of this session? The reason I ask that is when we do these sessions, I have a handful of slides. If you're a slide counter, I have a total of 21 slides. We're on slide 4 right now. I have some content, but at the same time, I want you all to help build what we're going to discuss and help teach each other. So anyone want to jump in with what they'd like to get out of this session, this little discussion? Yes, ma'am.
We are in the process of developing our scope of work and deciding how we want to frame this RFP, RFQ, and would like to get feedback from consultants prior to releasing it.
Gotcha.
And we're trying to figure out how to go about getting that feedback from consultants. Just so that we do have a really clear scope of work and make sure we're all on the same page before we receive them. So just your thoughts on that too.
That's great. So I'm going to touch on that briefly on the next slide before we dive in too much. So good timing. Yes, sir.
Tim, a question, just like how to decide, should we do an RFP versus should we do an RFQ?
Yep. What's the difference and why one over the other? We will be hitting on that for sure. Anything else out? Go ahead, James. Appropriate budget. I wish I could tell you that exact answer. But what we'll talk about here in a little bit will hopefully help you be able to find some of those answers out, whether it's a budget or budget range. So that way you can align things. Yes, follow up.
Providing the budget upfront.
Good question. And I'm going to ask you all that later because I have an opinion as a consultant and someone in the public sector. But, and just so you know, consultant, yes, dark side consultant, but we also provide on-call support. So I'm in and a day out with some of the communities we provide support for. And so I sometimes wear your hats on that side of the equation too. So definitely appreciate and understand some of the challenges you all face when you go through this process. Something I want you to think about as we get into a couple of these next prompts is what has frustrated you in the past, whether you've written RFPs, RFQs, been involved in the review of proposals, and for anyone in the room that's a consultant, I know there's a couple, what you've seen on the other side of things. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So kind of a quick overview. So this is going to get to your first question right off the bat. When in doubt, if you are not into the procurement process yet, you're just trying to figure out what your scope is, how you want to frame up your RFP, RFQ, have general questions, I would say a lot of firms, especially firms that work in the space that you're looking to do for your project, they'll take a cold call. I mean, I know I answer probably 3 to 4 calls, emails, calls a month. A lot of times it's because community or one of our community partners or organizations are pursuing a grant and want to figure out kind of what's their budget range, what should they be looking for. And a lot of times with that, I'm not just going to give a budget range because every consultant group, the budget's going to be different depending on what kind of deliverables and scope and elements you want. So a lot of times you'll get kind of an overview scope, high level. Obviously, there's a lot of things we'll talk about here in a little bit that can adjust the dials and the scales to either go up or down, but just pick up the phone or shooting an email to a few that you know. If you don't know, reach out to some of your colleagues from other communities in the area. sometimes online, professional organizations like Western Central chapter of the American Planning Association, which is where you all kind of are housed from our professional organizations. Sometimes they'll have a list of different consultants that work in the area as well. So you can also look at who's sponsored events recently that you had a good conversation with. But anytime, just sometimes giving them a call, shooting them an email. Like I said, there's a lot that I'll provide initial numbers, scope to. Sometimes I'll see the RFP or the RFQ come out after, and I see that they've adjusted some things, adjusted some numbers or some requirements. And, obviously I have to evaluate at that point whether it's something I'll pursue or not. But just because you reach out to the consultant group doesn't mean you're going to hire them guaranteed. So just keep that in mind. Same, if you want to go a little bit more formal, you could do a request for information. So you could do a little bit more formal request. This could be just asking for a quick letter type scope and budget for your purposes. It's nothing that's like etched in stone, but it allows you to kind of get a ballpark understanding of what those numbers could be, what that scope could look like. So those are a couple ideas before you get into the formal solicitation process. So beyond that, we move into the RFQ and or the RFP process, depending on what you're looking to accomplish, which again, we'll unpack here in a little bit. And then at the very bottom there is sometimes the sole source. If you already have a contract with a group and you're able to extend that to be able to do additional work or work that continues previous work, some communities with the on-calls with different groups can pull that in through the on-calls so that you don't have to go back out for another solicitation. As I tell clients that I work with and that we have on-call with, I'm like, you can get numbers from us and scope from us and then go out if you want to see something else. Because again, it's your project and what you're wanting to accomplish. And feel free to raise your hand if you have questions as we go. We can do that. So again, the frustrating RFP, RFQs, they aren't necessarily poorly written. Sometimes it's just the thought through the initial pieces going into this. So you might notice Claire there on the far right of the screen. So she joined TJ and I on a session a couple of years ago. And if you're wondering, there's a picture out there of her bringing a fake beard to our session, because a lot of times we'll have big, beautifully bearded planners and friends. So it's kind of a fun little play on words. But yeah, so there is a picture of that if any of you need it for cards, holiday cards, or anything like that. Perfect. Get it over to you, Heidi. Right, it's just how do you think through that RFP, RFQ? I think to your point, how do we know our scope is where we want to be and that we're going to get the responses we want? Are we aligned with what's changing in the industry day in and day out? So before you start, you need to pause and ask yourself a few questions. You can tell I have 9-year-old twin girls because minions are popular. I also enjoy it. Big kid at heart. What are we trying to learn from other firms? What is it we want to get from that firm? What is important to us in the evaluation? Do we want firms to respond to our scope, or do we want them to help define it? That can be a big difference between doing an RFP versus an RFQ. And we'll unpack that a little bit more later. And then at the end of the day, are we selecting the best team, or are we looking for the best approach and the cost? Because it could be very different. You could love the team and maybe their scope, maybe their budget's a little off, maybe not perfectly aligned, but if it's a team that you like and you've worked with them before, a lot of times, they'll probably work with you and flesh that out through contracting before you dive into things. On the flip side, you could hire a firm that has the best approach, best cost numbers, everything. You hire them, you get into it, realize you need to adjust some things, and they might say, nope, that's not how we work. This is what we contracted, and that's what we go with. So there's kind of that flexibility and that thought process to go into it as you move forward. So think to yourself, what is your goal for this specific solicitation? Do you have a clear defined scope, or do you want the firms to propose some different approaches? So you may have your scope in mind, but you may also ask them to provide some creative ideas or other things that maybe could be value add within your existing budget. Again, goes back to you might have firm A that can produce everything you ask for at that set budget. You may have firm B that can say, we can do all that plus maybe a couple of these other things. And firm C may be the opposite. We can't do any of it. So Think through that. Do you want innovation and creativity, or do you just want consistency? I always get a kick out of the budgets that are really low, but they want a lot. And they also want a lot of creativity to go into it. As we all know, creativity, innovation, it takes a little time. You got to work through that. You also got to figure out what the community or your partners are comfortable with. So that's something to think through. And do you know your budget, or at least a range? Getting to that point, like, should you include the budget if you know it? I can tell you that if it's been budgeted by your council, your commission, whatever, consultants will find it. We do our research. If we really want the job and if we're really interested, we scour, and AI helps a little bit more these days. So, you know, we're not browsing pages upon pages of budgets, but sometimes that's an important thing because, right, I can personally, and I know other firms can tailor our scope a little bit more. If you have a bigger budget and you're asking for a lot of engagement, okay, that's probably more realistic. If your budget's really small, but you're asking for 20 meetings, community outreach meetings, there's a disconnect here. We need to figure something out. Because otherwise, that might be why you don't get as many responses as you may be thinking, because there's some misalignment there. And again, goes to earlier where pick up the phone before you put out your RFP, RFQ, and maybe ask, or check in with some of your colleagues here in the room. Whoa, what happened? It's good on my end. Okay. Is there a button somewhere? Anyone know? Let me try this. I'm gonna do HDMI unplug and replug in. I probably just broke something. Let's see.
And maybe you can do an update.
Perfect. Unplug, plug back in, right? It's the best IT trick. Just unplug, replug in, or restart. Okay. How much flexibility do you want? That's another important question. Do you want a very rigid, strict process, or do you want some flexibility? So think through, and you could even include some of this in your proposal if you know it, or your RFP, RFQ, excuse me. Like, what are your must-haves and what are your wants, right? Like, we definitely know we need to do these things. That's what council commission has directed us. These other things we've heard, these might be nice. And those are those value add things that a consultant group could put in and show those value add, that maybe it's 10,000 more in budget, but you get all these extra pieces, or maybe it's at budget and you can get one of these things. So think through that and how you want to capture that. Are you wanting to refine the scope after selection? Again, that kind of comes down to a comfort level sometimes with a consultant group. So that's when you would typically do like an RFQ process, just look at qualifications, get an idea of kind of their approach to things, but then be able to kind of flesh out that scope together. Understanding you kind of have some bookends that you need to work within. Do you want phased or scalable options? So sometimes with budgets and budget cycles, if you're starting towards the latter half of the year and it's about 1 year effort, can you do part of it within this budget cycle and then see where the budget needs to be for the next cycle? So some of those discussions can be had. Again, fixed scope and cost, or again, scoping being collaborative in the process. So then how will we communicate flexibility? I think this is the hardest one because even proposing is extremely hard to talk about how you're going to provide flexibility or creativity in written words. Interviewing, really easy, but doing it in written text, that's probably one of the hardest things. And I think it goes both ways. It's really hard to establish some flexibility that you're looking for, but also then how do you evaluate against that? All right, so just these considerations as we start to unpack things here a little bit more. So if you're looking for a defined scope, if you have a defined scope you have, or you're looking for it, that's more the RFP process, more formalized, more content goes into it. If you need help shaping the scope, you just want some ideas, maybe, hey, let's give us your approach and let's talk about it together. Probably a little bit more of the RFQ, kind of teeters there on the line a little bit. There's some gray area. And then if there's cost certainty matters, if you have costs, if you have to work within parameters, you're probably leaning a little bit more RFP just because you have a kind of box you need to fit everything into. And then again, as we've mentioned, kind of that collaboration flexibility, you're probably looking a little bit more on the RFQ side of things. So as always, there is no right answer, but hopefully the goals, the things we discussed earlier in those questions, that should help to kind of drive which direction you're going. And just so you kind of know, this is what starts to look a little different on the other side as you're looking at the RFQs. They're a little bit more open-ended, have that flexibility built in. On the consultant side, oh, talk right. It's a little less time consuming. So sometimes your timeframes can be a little bit smaller. So that way you're not extending things out, months in the process. Again, it really works so you can help kind of discuss that scope a little bit more. The challenges with it though is, right, there's that possibility of scope creep. If you had the scope in mind and things start to get out of hand in those discussions, it's where also the cost can start to fluctuate and you might have kind of sticker shock later on if you haven't done some due diligence or looked at comparable efforts. The expectations may not be as clear. It all comes down to how you ask and what you ask in your RFQ. And again, maybe a little bit harder to compare unless you're kind of looking at just those qualifications and firms in that capacity. A lot of times too, if you know there's a firm you're likely to work with because you've had a relationship, but you have to do a procurement process, I kind of lean more the RFQ route, because even as a firm that's competed on those, if we knew the other firm was kind of going to get it, it would have been nice to have a little bit lighter effort on our side because it takes time to put these together. So just out of respect, I think it's kind of a good thing to kind of think about for that both ways. And as you jump over the RFP, I think pretty obvious here, right? The pricing comes into play, timelines come into play, a lot more detailed, fleshing out. You're starting to see what those deliverables are, what you're going to be expected to get. Again, big negative, it's more time consuming. It takes more time to put together if you're going to do it right. It's easy to copy and paste as it is with writing RFPs and RFQs. It's easy to copy from the other community, right? That has similar effort, but it's not going to be personalized. And I can tell you that it's very easy to do that approach, especially with time constraints and how we're all rushing all over. So really think through that and how much time you want to give for those efforts. And it may be more difficult to get more responses just because of that. Usually if the windows are shorter, it's a bigger effort. If there's uncertainty, that's where it starts to raise some questions. So a quick little checklist for you all to kind of think through. Again, it's not perfect, it's not the exact thing, and feel free to shoot holes through it. So understanding kind of clear project purpose and goals. That's something that should be in every RFP or RFQ. Understand, like, what are you wanting to get out of this? What is the overall intent? What are your core deliverables? Not saying every piece along the way, how many neighborhood meetings, how many outreach events, things like that. You can include that, but what are those core deliverables you're looking to get, the major milestones along the way as well for your timeline. Again, outreach expectations, this goes back to the scaled versus the cost side of things. Just think through, what would you at the bare minimum like to see from your community? Your community's best. What works best in your communities. The more you can provide some of that information in the RFP, RFQ, it helps a firm to be able to custom tailor the approach to meet your needs. What is the staff's role and responsibilities? Again, having been a former public sector staff, I always liked being involved when possible. And I remember working with some firms that would come in and they'd hear your ideas, be like, okay, that's nice, thanks. We know best, right? Even though it's your community that you work in day in and day out. So think through, how involved do you want to be, and include that information, because that helps with budget controls as well. Like if you're going to handle the communications to stakeholders, the flyers, some of those pieces, because you have that local presence and that relationship at the local level, that can bring costs down quite a bit. If the review of we'll say comp plan, for example, has to go through every department in the city or in the county to be reviewed, are you consolidating comments, or is the consultant team going to get 15, 20 different iterations that they need to try and package and figure out? As you can imagine, it drives up costs. So very similar to like when you're doing development review, passing those comments out to the applicants, thinking through that back and forth. And again, how involved do you want to be? If you want to be involved all along the way and hands-on, great. If you don't, that's perfectly fine too, but just understanding that can be helpful. Other special needs. So in some states, State to the south, Colorado, accessibility. So every document that is posted to the official website of the city, county, state has to be fully accessible for an audio reader program. What that means is a lot of formatting fixes and needing to know that ahead of time, because once you build something into a program, it usually can't be changed easily later on without reinventing the wheels. So that's a big one. Also thinking through, do you want a website created for you? Do you want to provide a website, a landing page? Some of those things are important to know because those can be a little costly to maintain and keep up. If you're needing special programs, there's a lot of new programs out there that track mobile data, right? Like where you're at to get an idea of location and who's visited your community. Well, some of those programs are really expensive. If you want it, just know that that's probably a few $1,000s of your budget right there just to have a program to be able to do certain special things. I remember an RFP I bid on in the Midwest that had a requirement or a wish list to do 3D modeling of their whole city, but their budget was like 100 and some thousand, plus a comp plan, plus some code audit. Quickly, you could see that's not going to add up because just modeling your city in 3D and GIS is probably $100,000 to $200,000 for this size community. So, had to be able to explain that in a response back and understand there's some disconnect here, a little misalignment. So, again, just thinking through those special needs, where your wants, where your needs, budget guidance. So I am a fan, if you know your budget, include a range or, will not exceed a certain amount. Because then what you can do is you can have the consultants put in, it's not just a cost-driven decision. So I think when you're kind of guessing, sometimes it's really hard to guess based on maybe your intended scope or what your goals are. If those other items aren't as clear, that last one gets really tricky. So if you know it doesn't hurt to include. Some procurement requirements will say no, they don't want to include that kind of stuff. I feel like a lot of the projects I've seen lately that include some budget range or not to exceed amount, they probably, one, get more responses to evaluate against, and two, it leads to a better outcome because you can align those deliverables and scope more with that intended budget. Lastly, how are you going to evaluate or score the RFP, RFQ? Again, if cost is a factor and it's 25%, that will steer some people away. And you might get a really at budget or below budget proposal, but may not be the best one for you to actually do what you're looking for. I always like to say, anyone can really probably write a comprehensive plan for their community, for a community, but it's all about how, and it's some of those extra technical professional pieces and how a consultant group is going to do it. That's going to make a big difference. Again, comp plan is just the easy one to talk about right now. Yeah, let's keep moving here. I'm looking at the clock over my shoulder. So think through this. What do strong proposals reflect? So when you're reviewing these, when you're seeing them back, you should see something that pulls you in, right? You should see that the consultant or that group wants to be part of your community. A lot of times this comes out in the cover letter, in their approach. You should be able to see that interest. If not, it's probably just a canned boilerplate, copy paste. Obviously, if they have other community names and things, that's a big red flag. How many of you have seen that, right? Yeah. And in final proposals, or final products, how many times have you read a draft and it has another community's name in it? Yeah, pet peeve. We won't stay on that too long. But understand your goals, understand that scope that meets your needs. If there's a scope requirement, if there's an approach requirement, see if it aligns with what you're thinking, what you're looking for. If the timelines and milestones are realistic, we all are very busy on all sides of the coin. And I can tell you timelines are very hard to keep and things oftentimes come up. So are those things factored in and thought through? Is the budget realistic and aligned? Again, going back to my example of that Midwest one I pursued, there was definitely a misalignment there. And had I said I could do all of that for their budget ask, I would have been curious what they thought. And I'm curious if anyone proposed that for them, because it would have been extremely costly and something would have been sacrificed along the way. Again, we're kind of those defined roles. So, right, if you see my name on the proposal, am I just the salesperson or from the firm? Am I the pretty face? Yes, you can chuckle, but thank you. Or am I actually involved in the project? I think, that's a great example is someone that's at that director level, principal level, like, yes, they can come, they can sell you on the project, they can say all the best things, but are they actually actively involved? Did they bring the team that's going to be actively involved along? And are they answering questions and getting to know you and having that rapport? I think that's really important. And then, as we mentioned earlier, those special needs. The one I didn't mention earlier was translation services. If you need to have things translated from English to Spanish, I've done an entire comp plan, both English and Spanish, and it takes time to do those translations. And if you have to hire someone. All right, so what you should expect to receive. These are kind of the core things that go into the RFQ and RFP. This should be part of your checklist that you put, like, we want at a minimum these things, maybe this order, cover letter, project understanding, what the firm and team overview is, who are you going to work with, right? What are their roles on the project? Now, you don't have to expect every single person, but at least those core individuals and staff that you're going to see day in, day out. Resumes or qualifications, subcontractors, if they're going to include a subcontractor right out the get-go, like include who that might be. Relevant experience, interesting. Relevant experience and project examples. This could be project profiles, list of others, references, other things. So that way you can get a feel. Is this a group that's qualified enough, competent enough to do the job? Have they done some before? And kind of how that goes forward. I will say the one I forgot about earlier on the slide before, but it just remembered it. So I can go back real quick. In terms of your special needs and how you're evaluating RFQs. If you have a requirement that 25% of the evaluation is going to be if the firm has worked in your community before, that's a big uphill battle and points to try and win if a group hasn't worked in your community before. So really that one either says that you know who you're going to work with, or two, this is not possible as someone from the outside wanting to come in and work. So keep that in mind too. That was one that just came to me. As you jump over the RFP, you see a little bit more, that's where you start to get the approach and scope, cost timeline, conflicts of interest, other forms that you may need. So as we work together, think through transparency. What do you know? What don't you know? What do you need to find out through the process, whether it's an RFP or an RFQ? What are your outreach needs? We've talked about that. That's really important. Local dynamics, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. What do you need in your scope? Again, the needs and wants, your budget range and timeline. Do you want that flexibility built in? Yes or no? Think through each other's constraints and expertise. If you're wanting to really lean on a consultant group for their expertise or a contractor for their expertise, make sure you identify that by, asking for their expertise, their scope, their approach, what will work best for your needs. What the understanding is, the organization, back and forth, make sure that there is a relationship being built. Level of effort. So there is time that goes into proposals, building proposals out the right way. I can say on average, probably 8 to 16 hours of time just working on a proposal and customizing it to a community for a project or a process that we've done before. If it's something new, it's going to take a little bit longer. Also thinking through with the level of effort, like, does it need to be mailed? Or can you just get an emailed copy? When you have to mail it, you have to factor in a whole nother week or an extra $150 to overnight it via FedEx. So think through just, do you need those hard copies or can a digital copy work? That's really important. So that kind of leads into those response timeframes. Again, RFQ, generally an RFQ, if you're not asking for a lot with scope and approach, because I've seen RFQs that ask for scope and approach. If you're doing a typical RFQ, probably a 3-week timeframe is pretty reasonable, 3 to 4 weeks for most groups. Because sometimes if you post on a Thursday, a lot of groups don't get it in their list of, projects posted online till like Monday or Tuesday. So gives you a little bit of time. For an RFP, I'd say about 4 to 5 weeks on the low end. That just gives time to kind of review, customize it, find teaming partners, and that it depends on the complexity. Much more complex projects, probably a couple more weeks. Bigger budget projects, think through that. So, and then as I mentioned, digital versus hard copy submittals. It's really important. Let's see. Paul, you wants to stop for lunch grabbing, or do you want me to keep going? I got about 4 slides left. Cool, perfect. All right, so local dynamics. Think through this, like right at your local level, there are things things you deal with day in and day out that are very important. They're going to drive success of a project. It can also make it very difficult. So if there are things that are important to know, like factor that into your RFP, RFQ. Obviously you're not going to go and say, well, our mayor is really difficult to work with. Like that's probably not going to go in your RFP, RFQ, unless you don't want to be there anymore. But, thinking through just there are dynamics, it could be anything about, hey, multifamily housing is really hard right now. We're facing challenges in this. We're getting pushback on these different things. So these are the considerations. Usually I'll ask openly, but since we're trying to roll so you can get to lunch, what is the community's apathy? Like, where's the community and the appetite for a certain project or effort? Political interests. Again, this might be a staff-driven effort, but do you have the political support for this effort we're going down? I've worked on projects where it's been disconnected. And as a consultant, then we're trying to like mend that bridge while staying in budget and trying to do all these other things that we didn't know. Overall size, organization, region size, if there's different groups we need to work with, if you know that you need to include these 5 to 6 specific stakeholders and we need to have conversations with them because they're partners in this effort. They're just not listed as owners of the RFP, RFQ. I think that's important. Hot topics, kind of mentioned multifamily just because that's always a hot topic. It seems like everywhere, but is it mineral extraction? Is the community frustrated with mineral extraction, but it's part of your culture, part of your economy. So how do we balance some of those things? The overall community culture, engaged versus disengaged community. You may ask for a lot of engagement, but if your community is just not interested in coming out, we can put all the advertisements together. We can do all that, but maybe it's better to have just some really targeted, focused engagement approaches instead of a lot. So kind of that less is more, quality over quantity approach. I won't read through all the others, but kind of what we talked about earlier, the abilities of staff, interest of staff being involved, timing with other efforts. If there's other studies going on that contradict or conflict with what we're doing, that could be interesting. Have worked on some where we were relying on data from other groups. And once the data came through, it wasn't good data, but it delayed the project a couple months waiting for said data. So that can be tough. That can be challenging. So just thinking through some of those different things. And again, underrepresentation, be honest in your response, and hopefully you're getting consultants that are being honest as well. Was it don't overpromise and underdeliver, do it the other way around. All right, last couple slides here, so that way we can get to lunch, because I know I see a lot of hungry faces. As you are probably wondering, should AI assist you in writing RFPs, RFQs? Who thinks AI should help you or could help you? Okay, how many of you are very opposed to AI's involvement? How many of you aren't sure? Perfect, thank you, honesty. There's some that didn't raise their hands, so you're good. And then on the drafting of a proposal side of things, how many of you feel like you could identify if a consultant submitted a proposal that was AI generated? Of course, Andrew can, Blair can, yeah. There's ways to do it. I will say that AI says that I write 20% like AI. I don't know why or how, but maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. So if you ever run it through a program, just know you can't always trust the exact percentages they tell you. So think of it as AI as a tool, right? Let it help you with certain elements, certain aspects, help it stitch narratives together. Make sure you're not creating redundancies that are also conflicting. I've seen submittal requirements, deadlines, budgets, dates, everything duplicated in RFPs, RFQs, and be contradictory. So then it requires a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up, sometimes reposting the RFP or RFQ. So just use it. It could be a good tool to kind of just flesh through, skim things to make sure it's aligned. You know, you can use it again as kind of a spell checker sometimes. So again, use it as a tool. There are limitations, as we all know. I don't know how many of you have run AI and just seen like how far can you go till you break it? It can happen. It gets off the rails quite easily. So also think through the ethical implications of AI. You know, as a consultant, it's something that came up a lot at our national planning conference a few weeks ago. It's a hot topic at all associations that I've heard of, from the engineering associations, surveyors associations. So it's something that's being discussed a lot. Think through if you have an AI policy at the government level. If you do, on how AI should or shouldn't be used, share that information with a consultant in your RFP or RFQ, because then they'll know if I use it to help with data collection or data research and I'm citing things, does the community or organization have certain parameters on how that needs to look? So that can be a really important one. And of course, as humans, right, we always want to double check everything because we're the best. So final takeaways, aha moments, any questions left unanswered? Yeah, Andrew?
For small towns with limited budgets, what are the easiest ways staff or anybody working with an organization can help shave some of that money off of a project? What do you see communities doing to save money?
So how can small communities save money when they have tight budgets, but still need certain statutory requirements or other plans or other documents?
But even aspirational stuff as well.
Yeah, I think some of it can be the phasing aspects. You know, what things can be done within maybe this year's cycle and maybe have to wait another year. You know, because whether you're building plans, code, writing codes, land development codes, other things, there's ways to phase those, and there's ways to create an incremental kind of approach. It's different. It's kind of outside the box thinking. So you have to anticipate it'll look a little different. It's almost like, you know, a transformer, and it'll take its form at some point in time, but that's one way to consider it. Local staff involvement. You know, if there's local staff that can go man a booth at a community event, you know, that could be a few $1,000s saved from a consultant's budget and the overall project budget. If consultant just gets you the materials, delivers, mails, whatever, but you're able to run that weekend event as local staff, you're already going to have a booth there. Those are great cost savings. We work with a lot of communities that do that, because then you're getting a little bit more, but you're also able to manage your budget. Some other things can be if staff, you know, are taking things on and they want to write certain chapters, as if they're the local experts and they already have all the data analysis, you already have reports that were done last year, and you're like, let's just use that data as a base starting point. You can use that to start moving forward. So other thoughts on how small communities or smaller regions could save budget? Anyone have any thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Just goes to like what we're dealing with we're thinking of doing the RFI. And we were even considering asking the consultant, like, what are things that you would prefer that we should be doing? And kind of with the process, the cost down, and try to help have the consultant help us figure that out.
I think that's a great one, because yeah, a lot of times it's like, well, this is what it would typically cost, but we only have this much to work with. Okay, then we know, like, maybe if we trimmed here or trimmed here, you'd still get a very quality product. You're just excluding a few components that may not be as relevant. Yeah, Andrew?
Yes, it's engagement is really good, and that's one of the most expensive pieces.
It is.
Engagement is something staff can really help out consultants with.
Yeah.
You know, and of course.
Yeah, and thinking through too, like while you're doing engagement, how can you maximize and overlap engagement? You know, try not say, oh, we want you this Friday, but then also next Thursday, and then the following Saturday for an event. Like, how can we smash that up to one big trip? That's always helpful too. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, I think expanding on that engagement in terms of a good consultant, contact the restaurant or the building, don't waste their time, like their valuable.
Yeah.
We have staff or assistants or other people that can do that. We often can do that so much quicker. And, you know, thinking about the condensing of events is always huge, and not having your consultant fly out 3 times, but only twice or once. I mean, that's a really great way.
Well, to build off that, so great example, I just did the math because I had to in my head. Have a current project, community gave us a list of phone numbers for the stakeholders. Even after in the scope, everything we said, that's kind of your job is to do this. They had some staffing issues, so more kind of fell on our plate. So we're in that, like, what can we do? And then also evaluate as we keep going forward, where's our budget and scope creep going? But just for my staff to be able to make those phone calls to about a couple dozen and keep doing follow-ups to get them to connect or give us an email so we can send them an invite. It was about 15 hours or $2,300 of the budget just in making phone calls for 15 hours, trying to get a hold of people. And grant, like for us, because of the proximity where this community is, we couldn't just walk in. If it's close enough, I'll tell my team, just go and do door to door kind of conversations, leave them a little flyer. But in this case, it's like that staff could have called, or they knew the people. They probably saw them at local events and probably could have just tracked them down a lot quicker, more effectively. So great example. Yes, sir.
Another thought is, you know, running planning department, we have access to a lot of information, a lot of phone numbers, a lot of email addresses, architects, contractors, and you kind of reach that group of people.
Yep.
Most of us have that in our database.
Exactly.
The ability to provide that information to you or to, if we send an email blast, let's say you have a survey, you want people to take.
Yep.
I've got 5,000 emails that I can send out in 10 minutes.
Yep.
And get them to do your survey, at least they can then get on the website and sign up if they want to participate. Another resource, like look at what resources do you have either through your permitting system, through your, you know, maybe the assessor has information. So I've heard some people slip the sheets of paper in when the tax bill goes out. Maybe, sometimes there's limits on what they can do and what they can't do.
Water bills sometimes.
Work either.
Yep.
The water bill, you know, if you're
We plug the little QR code and link on those. Yeah.
something on that.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about that too is what do you think the success rate is on an email coming from your local community's email link versus my consultant email link? And the likelihood it's going to the person or they're just dumping it in the trash or it goes to their spam. It's a big difference. They're more likely to hear and see that official email and know it's coming from something legit, especially today when we get so many spam emails, right? So something to think through. Yes.
Build a website, public processes.
Yep.
Stuff like that, so. Out there.
Yep.
So. It's still something we pay for, just not for a different budget.
Yeah, well, and for a bigger community, bigger city, like sometimes there's that cost savings. You have your own platform that has projects, maybe some engagement stuff. There is a cost savings because governments get a better rate than consultants do because we're like project by project, or you get the sweetheart deal for a little bit with a group. On the flip side too, if we can build a project website, you know, Esri story map, some of these things, they're okay. I can tell you, it's a lot of work for a little bang for your, it's a big bang for kind of a little buck. Little bang, big buck. There it is. I'm like, that's backwards. So, you know, sometimes just having your landing page, even a planning department landing page, what is the project? Here's a 101. Here's the link to engagement or the schedule. Sometimes that's the most successful because at the end of the day, when the project's all said and done, the consultant owns that website or manages the website, it disappears. I mean, hopefully they're still driving you to the municipal website first or your county website first. Definitely a rough recommendation.
That's the question. Where do you look for RFPs and RFQs that are posted? Like where? Teton County, we use public purchase. I don't know if anybody else uses that.
Yep.
Where do you look? I mean, where are you finding these things posted?
Yes. Public purchase, bid nets. We look at, you know, if it's an area that as a consultant, we have a relationship or we want to work in that area. A lot of times we're looking at city and county web pages, you know, monthly maybe, but a lot of times those online purchasing programs. So we BidNet.
Oh, big.
Yeah. It's like Rocky Mountain BidNet. It has a lot of communities through. I mean, it's across the country, but there's a lot through kind of the Colorado, Montana, Wyoming region. Other thoughts on places to host?
Last webpage.
I was gonna say your association web pages too. WildPass, APA.
Colorado.
Yeah, and use your adjacent community, states, because you have firms that, have more of a presence maybe in adjacent states, but you still probably want to work with them. So
We send our RFPs out to ones we know. We just send them directly to you. So we're just like, hey, we don't want you to play around, just get us,
I love it when people do that because one, it shows that I haven't messed anything up too bad. They like working with me still. But it's also just like a good reminder, especially I've had a community like the week before, they're like, you are submitting something, right? I'm like, I guess I am, yes. So, but I think it's really important when you have those lists, when you have the groups you want to work with, send it there. But if you're wanting to cast a big net, put it on all those websites. A lot of times purchasing requires what, like 3 at least bidders on a lot of projects the first time around. So depends on your local rules, but just double check that. Yes.
Somewhat jokingly, but not really. Do you have any examples just from the default side of, I will never do X, or never agree to X again, that did not work out, it wasn't what I thought? What are the key catches you're looking for when you think?
Good question. One is creating videos with development processes or other things. Videos are timely, and especially if you have to do the accessibility part too with it. I'll do them if it's a good bang for a buck and the budget's reasonable to accommodate. I did one that was really tight and we ate a good chunk of it because at the end of the day, I wanted to still get a good deliverable out the door, and we were playing in the system to see what we could do. So we just kind of absorbed some of it. But not all firms probably would do that. They probably ask for more money. I'd say there's probably a mix of firms like 50-50 that more relational side, more transactional side of things. And it also depends on your relationship with them. So sometimes technical videos and things, because sometimes the bang for the buck's not there. Translation services, if only 5% of your population is maybe bilingual based on census, especially if you're wanting everything in different languages, that can be challenging. So there's some of that like evaluation that goes in, like when we look at the asks or the wants and the needs in an RFP, RFQ and budget, and then understanding the community, because a lot of times a lot of consultants do research ahead of time to get to know the community, understand what one we're getting into, or two, what do we need to, how do we need to frame this up best? So
Maybe something from your discussion, so you think you want this, but only 5% of the population.
yeah, and I think in your RFP, RFQ, like those are some of those like maybe wants, but maybe provide a rationale for why or why not. And you could agree to disagree too at the end of the day. And you could say, no, we really want this. And the consultant could put, okay, this is going to be another $6,000 for us to do it. And then you have to have that decision at some point. But yeah, I haven't experienced a lot of big negatives. So I would say when you're getting data from other groups and stuff, that can be a little tricky. It can cause some delays. But yeah. Other thoughts? All right. Well, we're way past. You need to get to lunch so we don't delay your 1 o'clock. So thank you all.
Lori? I see about her there. I noticed it's a full. But. If we are. Most of it. What's the project? There was the beginning of Sorry. No, I'm not. Where is that driving? Anyway.
Oh, right.
Yeah, or here, just email it to, the. Three days ago. Strong wildcats, you know that? Jumped over, but we were one place. I was like.
I know. Unfortunately, I love this.
We had a same when
And some of them survive.
Yes, they just decided.
So, I know.
That looks really bad. Got all of that.
Hello, you have something available? Yes. Yeah, there's somebody. Right. Along with like government.
Usually people don't come.
Out there. Well, see more banners. Oh. So really, on that, like an hour.
Typically see more. I always try to like play them.
It was called a little bit. I think they're really nice. Yeah, there wasn't.
Just gonna be. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I go by that. I think I really. No, that's fine. That's what I'm. No, what's like? We're going.
I'm gonna session.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Somebody. So.
So.
About my friend is easy.
Yeah.
We're looking around, doing drops, you know, all the section here, whatever. Being 38, there's taxes running around. That's an urban wildlife, that's 30.